Good evening, everyone. A special welcome to our in-person community and those who are viewing online. I'd like to call this meeting to order.
Ms. Sonier,
Present.
Ms. Cousins,
Present.
Ms. Fowler, Ms. Vowell,
Present.
Mr. Davis,
Present.
Ms. Jones,
Here.
Dr. Roberts.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Let's move to the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tonight's Spirit of Excellence goes to the 2021 Salute to Excellence Scholarship and Gala Awards virtual winner. The St. Louis American Foundation recently honored Jonathan Strong, principal of Merrimack Elementary, at the 2021 Salute to Excellence Scholarship and Awards Virtual Gala. His philosophy for education can be summed up in one word: service. He said he believes it is his purpose to serve as a steward for learning and growth. Education has always been my chosen career path, Strong said. It's also a family legacy. My grandmother was a school teacher in Natchez, Mississippi, and my mother taught special education for St. Louis Public Schools for over 25 years. Congratulations, Mr. Strong. I'd like to move to the approval of the minutes. Can I get a motion and a second for the minutes of September the 25th, 2021?
I'd move to approve the minutes for September 2021 with one amendment under adjournment. It says motion to end the closed session. That was an open session. So we just need to omit the word closed.
Second.
Ms. Sonier,
Yes.
Ms. Cousins,
Yes.
Ms. Bowles,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Yes.
Dr. Roberts.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Can I get a motion and a second to approve the minutes of September 28th, 2021?
I'd move to approve the minutes for September 28th, 2021.
Second.
Ms. Sonier,
Yes.
Ms. Cousins,
Yes.
Ms. Bowles,
Yeah.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Dr. Roberts.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Dr. Adams?
Good evening to the board and to the public. A couple of announcements before we get started with presentations. The St. Louis Public Schools, in partnership with BJC Children's Hospital, will host a COVID-19 vaccine clinic this Saturday, November the 13th, from 9 until 12 at the Gateway Complex. The 2-dose Pfizer vaccine will be available for children 5 to 11 and 12 to 18, with boosters available for adults. Affinia Healthcare Mobile Unit will also be on site for state-required immunizations, so we still have a number of students who have not completed those dosages. Every SLPS family member who receives the vaccine 2-dose shot for the first time will receive a $100 gift card from the St. Louis City Department of Health while supplies last. Event information, including the flyer, is posted on the district's social media accounts and on www.slps.org. Since I'm talking about vaccinations at this point in time, year-to-date, students who have been identified as positive, year-to-date 315. We've quarantined 3,372 students since the beginning of the school year, which is August the 23rd. For staff, 105 positive staff incidents and 59 quarantined staff since the beginning of the school year. Update, over the last week, 0 quarantine staff and only 4 positive cases this past week, which means we're moving in the right direction. And as of this week, as of last week, the quarantine for staff was 0. Confirmed cases last week, 2 elementary and 2 administrative, not as a result of contact in the school itself. So the notion of where we're going with the vaccine, or vaccinations, if you will, and cases in the school district is moving in the right direction, which is really positive news. Young Citizens Award, the St. Louis Rotary Club number 11 recognized 24 St. Louis Public School scholars at the 2020-21 Young Citizens Award luncheon. The Young Citizens Award is presented to scholars who excel in the classroom and our community. Along with the award, each scholar receives a note with a gift card from St. Louis Rotary, a Western University t-shirt, Western University swag bag, and a promissory note for $5,000 scholarship to Western University, renewable for 4 years. We looked at juniors this year as opposed to seniors, which means that those students have an opportunity over the next year to prepare themselves to make sure that the grades and they're taking care of the application process and can have full scholarships to Webster University. I want to thank the St. Louis Rotary Club for that. Last 2 announcements before we get started with the first presentation. All SLPS buildings and offices will be closed Thursday, November 11th, in recognition of Veterans Day. Friday, November 12th, has been changed from a student day to a professional development day for employees as we move forward to getting ready for the Thanksgiving break. Speaking of Thanksgiving break, Monday, November the 22nd through Friday, November 26th, in recognition of the Thanksgiving holiday, all buildings and offices will be closed during that week. The exception will be, we have about 37 sports activities that are taking place on the 20th to the 27th, and those functions will still continue to take place during that week. Basketball tournaments, basically. And so while school will be closed, our athletes will still be participating in extracurricular activities. Those are the announcements at this time. I'll come back with one at the end. At this point in time, Dr. Marion Smith, Deputy Superintendent of Academics, is going to present first, followed by the CPN, and then followed lastly by a financial update from Mrs. Banks.
All right, good evening, President Roberts, Vice President Jones, board members, Superintendent Adams, SLP staff, families, and scholars. My name is Dr. Marion Smith Jr. I'm the new Deputy Superintendent of Academics. And so first, I want to thank all of you for just an opportunity to recenter and refocus our core business as a school district, which is learning and teaching with an emphasis on learning, right? And so before we begin, I offer a visual, if you take a look at the screens up here, that I do believe encapsulates our work as an academic office and as an academic office team, right? It is being in our schools with our scholars, whether they are our earliest scholars of pre-K or our graduating seniors, engaged in the work. And so having an opportunity to really recenter that conversation today. And so in our time together this evening, you'll hear from me and two other members of the academic office. One will be Dr. Moody, Kimberly Moody, our Director of Curriculum and Instruction. The other will be our Director of Virtual Learning, Natasha Mitchell. And what we're going to talk about is just really providing an overview of where we've been over the last 12 weeks, right? It's been 12 weeks of school, 12 weeks of navigating complex changes, and what that has really looked like for us in the academic office. And so what I want to do is to start with a big picture. So we really remain in a season of change and transition due to COVID, right? So no one would argue that this has not been a season of change for everyone. And so as this has allowed for us to really pause, to reflect, to really think on how can we do learning and teaching differently? But we also have to allow ourselves permission to think outside of that status quo thinking, right? And so one of the things that we've been focusing on as an academic office is understanding how the first 12 weeks of school have really impacted our particular work. And so I like to say that we all signed on to do this work, right? But we didn't sign on to do this work during a global pandemic. And so the academic office has been really focusing on how are we moving this work forward. And so what you're going to hear as we take a look at that learning guide and agenda is talking a little bit about the academic office work. You'll hear a little bit about some of our goals, and then we're going to spotlight a few key areas, one being the English language arts, knowing that you approved literacy curricular resources that we're implementing for this particular school year. Then we'll delve a little bit deeper into understanding what does that look like over the course of the last 12 weeks. You'll hear some and see a few baseline data, pieces of information, grades 3 through 5. Then we'll talk a little bit about those individual reading success plans. And so how are we really providing those targeted supports to all of our scholars in the area of literacy? Because if you can read well, write well, think well, speak well, we know that we can do other subjects well as well. And then lastly, we'll end with just our blended learning and virtual learning, because this is the vehicle for us to be able to move this particular work forward. And so I felt it was critically important before I turn it over to members of the academic office team to really ground you in the why, the what, and the how of the academic office, because it looks a little bit different previously. And it looks a little bit different in navigating in a global pandemic, right? And so I'm going to take a little bit of time just to talk a little bit about this. And so the why of our work has really been focused on that dynamic tension between what is important versus what is urgent, right? And so I'll say that again, just for clarity for everyone that's listening outside of this space, what is important versus what is urgent. And so we know that our core work is learning and teaching with an emphasis in learning. And so how do we hold that dynamic tension of addressing the realities that the board has acknowledged, staffing, quarantines, everything that's happening in this space, and still remain focused on our core business of learning and teaching? And so that is shown up in 3 specific ways to guide our work as an academic office. It's the why, the what, and the how. And so the why of our work this year has been in 2 areas. The first is to learn, unlearn, or relearn, right? And we focus on that key component, unlearning. And so how do we unlearn what we may have done last year, the year before that, to really lean into learning it differently for this particular school year? And so we know that we can't do things that we did last year because the data may show that it may not have worked in those previous years. So how do we lean into thinking differently about that particular work? The additional why of our work is this concept of how are we changing our habits of mind? Once again, we signed on to do this work. We never thought that we would do it during a global pandemic. And so how do we shift the way that we think about the work to really disrupt and dismantle whatever those inequities are in our systems, our policies, our practices, and our procedures so that all of our scholars can thrive? Is it going to be easy? Absolutely not. But we are intentional about how we're envisioning what this work can look like and sound like as we move this work forward. So that's the why. The what of our work can be identified just in 3 areas. And so I like to use the phrase from Brene Brown that talks about clear is kind and unclear is unkind, right? And so from the academic office perspective, that's our focus. How can we be very clear about the work that we're doing so that everyone understands what this charge looks like in the midst of everything else that's going on? And so 3 things that we've outlined for our work for school year 21-22. The first is how do we strengthen the academic and social emotional core through tiered supports that all of our scholars not only have access to the information that they need and the resources, but they actually have those targeted supports. And you'll hear an example of that through our SAVIS curricular resources when Dr. Moody talks about that implementation. You heard a little bit at a previous board meeting from our Student and Support Services Director, Dr. Mitchell, around how are we blocking and tackling some of those non-academic needs to ensure that we can focus on the academic needs when we're in the classroom. The second what of our work in the academic office is how are we using multiple sources of data to really surface and address those promising practices that we're seeing in our schools. And you'll hear a little bit about that through just our academic office learning walks and what that has looked like and how we use that work to spotlight what's actually happening across our system and sharing that across all of our different schools. And then lastly, our focus is literacy. That doesn't mean that we are negating all other subject areas, but we're really focusing on the board approving pre-K through 8 literacy curricular resources and really leaning into that space of literacy. Once again, if you can read well, write well, think well, speak well, and have the targeted resources now with this viable curricula, then how do we do that in ways that meet the needs of all of our scholars? One of the things that I wanted to share with all of you is this visual has served as an example of the work in the academic office. And so it is really around research from 2000, and it hasn't changed over the last 21 years. And so on the right-hand side, you see examples of adult behavior, right? And so at the top, you want to have the change that we're talking about. We want a change and a shift of the way people think and how they move the work forward. But the research has shown, and the work that we're focusing on in the academic office, is that in the absence of one of those key components, vision, skills, incentives, resources, action plan, it produces a particular adult behavior. And so I'll just share that example. We go down to that second column there. In the absence of vision, it shows that there would be adult confusion. And so we've been using this as a frame to focus on those 5 key elements that need to be in place in order for us to move this work forward. So our vision is very clear, talked about the why of our work. We talked about the skills. So we're providing targeted, tiered professional learning. You'll hear a little bit more about that from Dr. Moody. we're talking about incentives, but oftentimes when you think of incentives, you think of monetary incentives. What we're focusing on are how are we building those promising practices and spotlighting those across all of our schools? Because there's amazing work that's happening across all of our school buildings, but oftentimes we don't have an opportunity to see them or to spotlight them across all of our different networks. The fourth thing we've been focusing on is those resources. Once again, how are we providing the resources, curricular resources, so that people and our scholars can actually receive what they need? And then lastly, that action plan. So I just wanted to present a visual for those of you that may be like me, who are those visual learners, around what has this work look like from the academic office around why they're choosing to focus on these particular components as they move this work forward. And so one of the things, as we continue to think about our goals for school year 21-22, I think it's critically important to spotlight just a few goals that we've called out for this particular school year. And so you see them there: curriculum and instruction and all of our content areas. Second goals that we're calling out are career and technical education. Our third goal that we're calling out in the academic office is college and career readiness. And then lastly, around blended learning and virtual learning, which is the vehicle to help us accomplish those particular goals. One of the things that you saw in the slide deck was a link that provided you with the information to all of the school year 21-22 goals from the academic office, from all of our different content areas. So you can see exactly what each department is working on and each content area is working on for this year. But what I wanted to call out is just a shift that we've made in the office. And one is having our network superintendents. And so those individuals that provide coaching, support, are our direct connection to our schoolhouses, report directly to the Deputy Superintendent of Academics. And they're a part of the academic office. That wasn't the structure previously. So that allows for them to be a part of all of the critical conversations that we're having, a part of the collaboration, a part of all of the discussions around using data to inform those particular practices. And so we're excited to have them be a part of this particular work as we shift our thinking. And so one of the things that I will talk about as we think about goals is having an opportunity to spotlight a particular goal that is critically important that we wanted to surface for all of you, is in the area of ELA literacy. Once again, we're mindful that you all approved that pre-K through 8 literacy adoption. And we want to spotlight just what have we been focusing on in this particular area over the last 12 weeks. And so with that, I'll turn it over to our Director of Curriculum and Instruction, Dr. Kim Moody.
Good evening. I am Dr. Kimberly Moody, Director of Curriculum and Instruction for St. Louis Public Schools. And as we work diligently to engage our scholars in learning in our current environment, our current climate with COVID recovery or in the midst of our pandemic, we're facing a number of things: learning loss, accelerated learning, and blended and tech-enhanced instructional programming. We understand that it's critical not to lose sight of our core purpose, which is learning and teaching with an emphasis on learning. Our spotlight goal was selected because the board recently approved funds for 2 major initiatives associated with literacy, which are the approval of the SAVIS literacy resource to support ELA instruction in grades pre-K through 12, and the hiring of reading teachers to support in our Title I schools. Goal 1 is our scholar achievement goal, which establishes that with effective reading instructional practices, SLPS scholars in grades pre-K through 8 will grow 1 year in reading. And goal 2 is our implementation goal for our new Tier 1 literacy resource, again, focusing on equity and access with a scholar-centered multi-tiered systems of support, establishing that Tier 1 literacy programming will be implemented with fidelity in addition to targeted Tier 2 and Tier 3 intervention supports to Title I elementary schools through reading teachers as well as district-wide support to all scholars reading below basic via individualized reading success plans. Next slide. And so now I'll talk a little bit about our SAVIS implementation rollout. So our SAVIS implementation and rollout consist of strategic, specific, and explicitly designed activities to enable and support educators with adapting to and implementing SAVIS literacy curriculum resources with fidelity in grades pre-K through 8. It features early access to materials and products, a product overview before the close of last school year, implementation plans, which can be found in your board handouts, featuring a framework that encourages equity and access via a multi-tiered system of support to all educators engaged in the program rollout. Our Tier 1 support features district-wide professional learning. Our Tier 2 supports feature small group booster sessions, and our Tier 3 support features a more individualized approach with one-on-one coaching sessions with our curriculum specialists. So far, we have had 10 Tier 1 district-wide professional learning experiences with SAVIS, 15 Tier 2 small group booster sessions with SAVIS, and 83 Tier 3 individual coaching sessions with our curriculum specialists. Looking ahead, our ELA specialists will continue to lead observations to determine highlights and areas of growth in accordance with the SAVIS ELA implementation success guide and checklists. Data collected will be shared regularly in our quarterly evidence of impact review sessions, where the curriculum and instruction team work collaboratively with network superintendents to review data and define next steps to ensure the delivery of a guaranteed and viable curriculum for the purpose of garnering the highest levels of student growth and achievement. We have implementation plans for all 3 of our newly adopted resources, including 3 cheers for pre-K, SAVIS My View, and SAVIS My Perspectives. Those checklists are also available in your board guide. Next, we have represented is our STAR reading baseline data. We have some trend data here for elementary students in grades 3 through 5 over the course of the last 3 years between 2019 and 2021. We're looking distinctly at STAR data for grades 3 through 5, as they are the first group of scholars who take the MAP test. And according to data presented by the National Conference of State Legislatures, 3rd grade students, it's especially important to focus on this group of scholars because it is the final grade that curriculum engages them in learning to read. Continued support services is also critical to students beyond grades 3, especially for scholars experiencing reading difficulties, so that we can support them in accessing reading to learn. Next slide. This slide represents our baseline data. This is our 2021 baseline literacy data. Again, we're focusing on grades 3 through 5. This data was used to determine what scholars needed multi-tiered support services in literacy via our individualized reading success plans, a reading instructional tool that supports the design of individual interventions and benchmarks growth toward independent standards-based mastery. The asterisks you see here indicate scholars who qualify for the SLPS Individualized Reading Success Plan. And now I'd like to welcome Dr. Marianne Smith Jr. back to the podium to say a little bit more about our individual reading success plans.
All right, thank you, Dr. Moody. And so I'm standing in the place of Dr. Kay Royster, who leads a lot of our work in the individual reading success plans. And so next slide for us. And so one of the things we wanted to talk about is where have we been? And I'll highlight just a few key areas there. And so back in 2019, 2020 school year, we began the process of developing a framework for creating a uniform district approach to individualized reading success plans. And so during that time, since then, there's been community collaboration with educators to really get to a place of what do we really need to do in order to move this particular work forward. I want to note one correction at the very beginning where it says Senate Bill 54. And so that is what's coming down the pipeline effective July of 2022, where it says that all of our scholars who qualify for reading success plans or should have one, right? Those that are performing below proficiency in certain grade levels should have a plan. And so our goal right now is targeting grades 3 through 5 with the hiring of those reading intervention teachers and leveraging those teachers to support our classroom teachers outside of that grade 3, 4, 5 span to really move this work forward. So we're ahead of what is required of us in that Senate Bill 54, July 2022. But going back to the work of 2019 up until this point, having deep collaboration with colleagues, with community partners to say, what should this plan include and how do we move that work forward? And as Dr. Moody mentioned, one strategic strategy that we implemented was hiring reading intervention teachers at the elementary level to focus on that data that she presented around grades 3, 4, 5. If we understand reading to learn versus learning to read, then we have a deep understanding of how to really move this work forward. So we really targeted grades 3, 4, 5 with our reading intervention teachers. Next slide for me, please. And so a lot of information here, but I'll just highlight just a few key components. Right now, where are we? We have 29 elementary schools have developed the individual reading success plans. And in your forward binder, you do have a copy of a complete individual reading success plan. So you see exactly what that process looks like, or at least you see the document and how we outline the process, the metrics that we're using, and the timeline that we use to engage in that intervention process. And so just to talk a little bit about that a little in depth is the individual reading success plans serve as a guide for identifying what those gaps are, whether that's 1 grade level below, 2 grade levels below, or more. And as you see, it's identified specific strategies that have been called out using the resources from SAVIS curricula to be able to address some of those deficiencies in those spaces. Another thing that I wanted to call out is that the individual reading success plans identify what those skills are and those instructional resources. I think that's critically important to highlight because previously we know that there may not have been this core curricula in grades pre-K through 8. And so now we have that viable curricula, that standard approach as to how we're using common curricula to be able to move this work forward, or at least curricular resources. And then our reading teachers are utilizing these interventions and these components of the newly adopted literacy program to move the work forward. And so where are we going? That speaks to that Senate bill that I just talked about that goes into effect July 2022, is that we are developing the individual reading success plans for all of our scholars that meet the requirements outside of just that grade 3, 4, 5 grade span. And we're using our current reading intervention teachers to learn through their process and working with our literacy specialist, Dr. Kay Royster, as to how to do this in a sustainable way, number one, and how to do this in a way that's system-wide, moving beyond just grades 3, 4, 5 to address those reading deficiencies and needs of scholars beyond grades 3, 4, 5. And so one of the things that we wanted to end our time with, knowing that this is just a spotlight of what's been happening in the academic office, is if we think back maybe 25 or so years ago, maybe 40 years ago, not everyone had a cell phone in their hands, right? Not everyone had a mini computer at their disposal. And so as we think about all of these strategies that we're outlining, how we're changing our habits of mind around this work, if we just allow ourselves permission to do so, we know that blended virtual learning is a viable option for how we move this work forward. It is something that has to be a part of the conversation because we know that March 2020, we were all hit with that and had to shift immediately into this space. And so you'll hear from Natasha Mitchell, our Director of Virtual Learning, to see how are we bringing all of this together around looking at what's happening in the academic office and understanding that blended virtual learning is the next phase of that viable curricula and resources that we have at our disposal. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Mitchell.
Thank you so much, Dr. Smith. Good evening. So as we considered blended and virtual learning expectations for the 2021-22 school year, one thing that we know is that scholars of St. Louis Public Schools are digital citizens of the 21st century. And our role as facilitators of learning and teaching must ensure a more equitable and innovative approach to instruction. With that, what we outlined as our core expectations are those on the slides. That teachers maintain an airtight daily schedule that's predictable for families, that's predictable in the event of a quarantine. That was something that served us very well last year. Also, that all teachers of record continue to be facilitators of standards-based instruction. We began implemented the blended learning instructional framework last year. We are implementing it this year, and we will continue to do so for the foreseeable future. And then finally, as we think about, we are back to in-person instruction, right? But that doesn't mean we do not maintain an online presence in this year, in this day and age. And so all of our teachers are expected to maintain the following components of an online presence. One is an up-to-date webpage. That's pretty basic. The next one is that they are still maintaining a Microsoft Teams page. This is critically important as we consider our one-to-one environments. We need a digital hub in which to get assignments to our scholars in an effective and efficient way. And Microsoft Teams offers us the platform to do so. And finally, this is not a new expectation, but we are asking that every single teacher of record maintains an online gradebook in SIS. This is great not only for just keeping up-to-date, accurate gradebooks, having that on hand when asked, but also for our parents with the parent portal. They can access their scholars' grades at any time. And so all of the expectations for blended and virtual learning are expectations that have actually been in place since the last school year or before. By implementing these strategies, not only are we innovating our learning spaces, we are also ensuring in the event of a quarantine or closure, we stand ready to pivot uninterrupted to quality and effective learning and teaching. So let's talk about where we are now. As we sort of delineate the terms blended learning, virtual learning, and technology integration, I just want to name that blended and virtual learning are overarching instructional concepts, models that we implement. When we talk about technology integration, we're really talking about day-to-day instructional strategies in which technology is integrated into the learning and teaching. So this year we began in what we'll call a technology deficit for a variety of reasons. So some scholars started off the school year with no access to technology in the classroom due to fines, loss, contractual issues, things like that. So we realized this was a barrier, right? And so this created environments that were not actually one-to-one learning environments, even though we had the technology to do so. So a strategy that we utilized to combat this is what we're calling the day user model. And so day user model is pretty much what we did pre-pandemic, in which technology devices are distributed during the instructional day. And so there was communication initially sent out September of 2021 for schools to distribute all remaining technology for day use. As we visited schools during our Ambassador 2.0 visits, we noticed in some classrooms this still had not happened. And so we sent out additional communication through the network superintendents to ensure that this was happening. So ensuring every classroom every day is a one-to-one environment is paramount for effective technology integration. While we continue to show up every day as educators during a pandemic, it must also be acknowledged that we are educators during the fourth industrial revolution. The fourth industrial revolution is a fusion of advances in artificial intelligence, robotics, the Internet of Things, 3D printing, genetic engineering, quantum computing, and other technologies. As we know this to be the world our scholars are growing up in, and we know we are preparing our scholars for a future with unprecedented advances in technology and jobs that don't even exist yet. It is our duty as educators to embrace the implementation of technology as a critical literacy, equally as important as reading and writing. Oh, I'm sorry, can you go back? I would like to invite you into two classrooms that you see on the slides. One is a 7th grade classroom at Compton Drew, in which students are engaging in a simulation on Nearpod. And the other is Mr. Ramos's STEM lab at Merrimack Elementary, in which 3rd grade scholars are using block code to program the Dash robots. And finally, let's talk about where are we going? So technology integration and blended learning in its most transformative applications are much less about using a technology tool or application and more about creating efficacy in our pedagogical practices. The academic office wants to ensure that there is intentional focus on supporting teachers with technology integration. For the 2021-22 school year, the academic office technology integration look-fors are the two key following strategies. One is the use of a technology tool to check for understanding or to collect formative assessment data during the instructional cycle. We know checking for understanding, collecting data is a key strategy for improvement. The use of the technology tool, again, just brings efficiency into the process. Teachers can collect data instantaneously, make mid-course corrections in the moment, and be very informed in every moment of their instruction. The second one is a scholar-based look for. It's evidence of scholar use of digital productivity and collaboration tools. So think about college and career readiness. This is when we're talking about Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Sway, Excel, all of these tools that allow our scholars to demonstrate their competencies, to show what they know, to publish their own work. Technology transcends all content areas. As we considered these look-fors, it is with the lens that they are applicable in every grade level and every content area. So as we think about this as part of our learning walk, I want to bring your attention in your binders to the academic office learning walk tool. And I just want to identify that this is a tool the academic office is using as a mechanism for collecting meaningful data in the areas that we are working to create positive change and improve scholar outcomes. With that, I will turn it back over to Dr. Smith Jr. for closing and questions.
And so turning it over to the board for any questions that you may have for just members of the academic office team.
Yes, I have a few. First, I want to thank you guys because this is a lot. And I definitely want to recognize the teachers during this time. This is truly a challenging time that we're faced with. You said that you guys have been kind of doing this monitoring where we are for 12 weeks. And I see you kind of put some of the statements on the urgent in your data. What have we defined as to be urgent matter that we should be really looking at?
Well, I think that, no, I appreciate that question. And so when we think about urgent in the academic office may look a little bit different than urgent in other spaces.
Right.
And so I'm going to speak specifically to urgent in the academic office
Mhm.
is looking at our grade 3, 4, 5 data, because that is where we're transitioning from learning to read to reading to learn, and really identifying the number of scholars that we have that are 1 grade level below, 2 grade levels below, even 3 grade levels below, and how are we actually putting the systems and structures in place to really address those needs. One that we have right now that we didn't have previously are the reading intervention teachers that are implementing those intervention reading success or those individualized reading success plans. So the urgency is literacy, grades 3, 4, 5, not to say that any other subjects aren't, but we see the numbers are high in those areas, and we're targeting that through just the deployment of those reading intervention teachers around those individual reading success plans.
And I want to thank you for this, the chart that you presented to show the change, the confusion, like that was helpful, especially once you explained it. But I think my question is, when we're looking at this, is this in regards to the teachers? Because I heard you say the adults. Is it in regards to the teachers, the parents, or is it just, is this what you're gauging when our teachers are dealing with the students, that this becomes a challenge for them, or is it across the board, adults as a whole?
I would say across the board as adults as a whole. But what we're looking at specifically is we are in a change management transformation process. And when we were asking questions about like, how are you feeling right now in this
Right.
space? Oh, like, I feel like anxious. And when you look at that, it says that, well, from an academic office perspective, then we need to make sure that we're tapping into what is that needs to be in place in order to address that anxiety. I really want to do this work, Dr. Smith. I really want to lean into this, but I don't believe that I have the skills or the resources. And so now we have a viable curricular resource, pre-K through 8 with SAVIS, and now we're providing targeted tiered interventions and supports and professional learning in that space to begin to address that anxiety, to hopefully change that behavior that they're experiencing.
So, and I thank you for that piece, because that's the resources was the aspect. It's kind of hard to kind of balance what we're looking at, because I know you're coming on an academic level and where you are in the presentation that you're giving. But of course, well, for me, I'm looking at it on that resource, that wraparound service, the challenges that student is faced with, even the teacher is faced with when they're trying to provide that level of education, because they're having so many other issues preventing them from being able to provide that skill set. So that's where I'm stuck, but I'm going with you on it. But the other question that I have on your slide number 7, you gave a breakdown on your tier 1, 2, and 3, and you were saying that you had 10 sessions. So I'm trying to understand the SAVIS that we approved. Is it in regards to all 29 schools that we were able to get this data, the 83 individual coaching, the 15, or was it certain schools that SAVIS was actually in working, if
I
that
know-
makes sense?
And I know that Dr. Mooney may be able to speak to that a little bit more.
Thank you. Yes, so tier 1, that's district-wide. Everyone can access it. So in fact, everybody has access to tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 supports. But tier 1 is district-wide. Tier 2 is accessible to small groups, whoever would like to engage in that small group support, and whatever educator feels like they need additional support with implementation. And then tier 3 is really specific, individualized support. That's one-to-one. The educator reaches out to the curriculum specialist and say, hey, I don't know how to do this. I really need some extra help. And that specialist engages with them one-to-one and helps and supports them with implementation.
Okay, so that's the part I wanted to get clarity on. You're basically saying the 10, the 15, the 83 is basically with the educator. If the educator is in need of support or services to really push this SAVIS program
Absolutely.
within the district. And I'm sorry, I was taking notes, and you guys gave a lot of information. The other question I'm having is, based on this STAR data on your slide 10, page 5, we're saying that we have below basic third graders, 64%, 47. Looking at that percentage, and I heard the statement made, where are we with getting the reading resource staff to actually be able to assist with that, if that's one of our urgent goals?
It is absolutely one of our urgent goals, and that is why we have our reading teachers staffed in grades 3 through 5. This is our baseline data.
Mhm.
So we understand that we intend to present growth data
Mhm.
at our next benchmarking. And so this is just where we are right now, but this is not where we intend to stay.
So I guess, and that part I get, but I'm saying, are we struggling in filling those resource teacher positions? Because the concern for me is that we're low. 64, 47, 39 is pretty high on our kids being below the average of reading. Do we have that level of support in those resource teachers staff to be able to provide that assistance to ensure that we're somewhere near the goal that we're trying to be for June 2022?
Absolutely. Thank you. So we do have vacancies for reading teachers, but they are not egregious.
Okay.
I can get that information for you.
Okay.
I think the number of 2 to 3, I think 32 to 33 out of the 35 are filled at
Are
this point in
filled.
time.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's what I wanted to talk about is just like the reading intervention teachers that have been selected are targeting 3, 4, 5.
Mhm.
And so the majority of those positions have been filled. Those are the individuals that are working specifically on those individual reading success plans.
Mhm.
And we're using what they're learning and how they've outlined what that looks like. as you see in your actual reading binder, to
Okay.
then work with all of those grade levels that are outside of 3, 4, 5 to say now as a classroom teacher in grade 7, I may have 6 scholars in my classroom that qualify for individual reading success plans. So how do I go about creating this plan, even though it's not required right now, but we know that it's coming down the pipeline. So we're leveraging those reading intervention teachers to be able to support and give us some professional learning tips on how to do that so that we can grow this to scale.
Okay. I think I've taken up enough, but I wanted to ask about blended, but I'm sure my colleagues will ask that, but thank you. Sir.
Yes,
Kind Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. My question was around the individual learning plan for a scholar. So when the teacher identifies a scholar that is in need of the reading intervention specialist, how do you involve the parent in their process? Is this a team? How's it a team effort?
No, absolutely. So if you take a look in your binders, you see that we're in the first phase of this process, which is just the development of the actual reading plan itself. So using the fall data. And then the second phase, as you see, there is opportunities for family involvement and scholar involvement as well. But the first thing we wanted to do was to make sure that we had an actual plan that says, here is the data that we're tracking, here is the intervention cycles, and then being able to say, okay, family, here's exactly how we're going to be moving this particular work forward. What is your particular feedback on just this overarching framework? Because we wanted to have a solid framework first, and then we can individualize it for, well, Marion needs this specifically in this area. Maybe it's comprehension or phonics a little bit more. And so we're going to lean into that, but we have an overarching frame that says, this is the structure. This is the cycle that we use, and these are the resources that we use. And so that's the first step. The second phase is then getting that family involvement to really tap into what do we really need to target for that individual student.
Kind of along the lines to what Ms. Cousins was talking about, I'm glad that we have been able to mostly staff all of the reading interventional specialists, but has staffing problems in schools taken away from those specialists being able to do the interventions if they had to cover other classes?
I would say it just depends on the school, right? And so our teams, like reading intervention teachers are in our buildings. We also have academic instructional coaches. We also have different staff members that are able to lean into this particular space. And so while we have hired specifically 3, 4, 5 grades, specifically for reading, we understand that it's an all hands on deck approach, right? And so outside of academics, we realize that there is operational pieces that you've all spoken about at length that we have to address. And so we're mindful of that. And we're looking at how can our academic office provide those targeted supports. You heard Dr. Moody talk a little bit about our curriculum specialists that are also providing those supports, providing lesson plans, providing some professional learning on how to move this particular work forward. So while we've targeted reading intervention teachers as a viable resource, we also have our academic and instructional coaches. I want to give a shout out to them publicly who are leaning into that space. And then also just other curriculum specialists that are tapping into that resource or being a viable resource as well.
If I recall correctly, and I may not recall totally correctly, and I didn't look this up before this meeting, but back as part of the consolidation plan and the literacy plan, I know this before you, Dr. Smith, but I think that there were a couple of components that were included in that. One is the possibility of some before school or possibly after school, small groups or one-on-one interventions. Has that been something we've been able to implement?
And so not as of yet, but that is topic still of conversation.
Okay. And then the other thing too, and I think this is probably still a topic of conversation as well, but there was supposed to be a community component to this as well in engaging literacy. Is that something that is still ongoing? I know we're still waiting for approval for volunteers to get in the school, so that's probably a difficult thing. But in terms of a community component to helping address literacy, is that something that you're still looking at?
So I can most likely speak to that, but not really answer it. And so one of the elements is we have had community collaboration as a part of the development of these particular plans, and then figuring out what that next step is going to look like. We're in conversations, and I know that Dr. Moody and Dr. Royster have been leading a lot of those conversations moving forward.
Okay. Because that was an exciting part of that consolidation plan. So if you could go back and sort of look at what that was and make sure that that's something that we can implement if possible, I think that would be helpful. in terms of the Savvis curriculum, when it was presented to us, it talked about how there were embedded assessments within the curriculum. Is that data that you're collecting, and would that be something you'd be able to share with us at some point?
Absolutely, absolutely. It has been a refreshing and welcome. When you want to talk about assessments, at least, it's been welcomed in our classrooms, and teachers are very excited that the assessment is embedded. And so although we did not present it tonight as our baseline data, we are collecting that data and we will be able to present that to the board.
Okay.
Yes.
And just so Ms. Mitchell doesn't feel excluded, I did have a question about sort of the implementation this year, because it's different from last year. And, you know, we've had, Dr. Adams said the number of quarantines we've had, and it seems significant. My question, I guess, is in situations where the entire class isn't quarantined, but maybe just individuals are, and this is particularly probably in middle schools and high schools where, you know, you wouldn't stay in the whole class with the same student. Have we been able to go back and implement hybrid learning in those instances, or has that been a struggle?
Actually, we put out a plan specific to quarantine. We called them our quarantine scenarios, and we have teaching and learning expectations outlined for various scenarios, including the full class is quarantined, but the teacher still is able to teach. A part of the class is quarantined, and on and on and on. And so in the event, if part of the class is quarantined and the remaining students are still in-person learners, the teacher has a couple options. One is, so it's twofold. They can upload tier 1 instruction, which can look like I'm recording my live teaching for the tier 1 component. And then they're also uploading the content. And so back to those expectations around all teachers have to have all of their content uploaded to Teams at the beginning of the week. Not only is this an efficient and innovative strategy, it specifically is a way to be proactive in the event there is a quarantine, because now as a scholar, all of my content is digital, ready to go. I can access it that week. So teachers get, they can get basically up to 2 hours of extra service pay per day when they are supporting quarantine scholars, one for uploading the tier 1 content, and then the second one is for holding office hours. That could look like one-to-one intervention. It could look like small group, but that is essentially how we have been supporting those quarantine learners. We do know some scholars are still without technology, and the curriculum department developed continuous learning packets. And so any scholar that is quarantined with no technology is accessing their learning that way.
Thank you. Oh, and I think it's important to note that if a student is vaccinated, they don't need to quarantine. So now almost all of our students, 5 and up, are eligible.
Exactly. That would be great.
Can I piggyback on the blended part? Are we doing, I see we continue to speak on the parental portal. Are we actually kind of getting an assessment or looking at feedback that parents have in reference to the blended, if they're having issues, if they're not, like, are we kind of assessing what that really looks like? Is it working? Is it not working? I'm just curious.
I would say not as much this year as last year, right? Because parents were supporting scholars at home so much last year. So we were constantly getting that anecdotal data. But that is something we can look into as a team.
Okay.
And definitely get back to you, because that's super important.
Thank you.
Do have one question. This is in regards to one of the slides that showed 2 schools. I think it was it Dewey or was it Compton Drew?
Compton Drew and Merrimack.
And Merrimack, okay, and they were using a reading tool, was it block code?
Yeah, that's
And-
that's a robotics and coding program. It's so there's robots for early learning. They're called Dash. And what it does is they have a free curriculum actually that is embedded. It is aligned to the computer science curriculum, and then into a coding curriculum. And essentially it's the baseline block code that leads students later on to be able to do things like code in Python, code at high levels, do applied robotics in classrooms. So it is a really foundational program that we hope with funding and things like that, that we can use this classroom specifically to model robotics and STEM in other classrooms.
I think that was part of my question. Are we using this throughout the district, or is this just one particular school that's using it, this particular block code?
So I cannot speak to all the other schools. I know this school specifically piloted because they were part of an innovation grant. And so they used their innovation grant money to buy 10 Dash robots. And so we're piloting this program there, but it is not district-wide as of yet.
All right, thank you.
I just had a question. I'm not sure which one this would be for. First, thank you all for all of your work. I can see our baseline. Do we have any like set goals of what we would like to see or the rates of improvements or?
And then one of the things that we provided in your board, or there was a link in the actual PowerPoint slide deck that gives you the goals for school year 21-22 for all of the academic office departments. And so it outlines the specific goals for the year. And so we can provide that to you just in a regular handout. If you didn't have opportunity to access that, it was just a link in the slide deck. It is.
Slide 5.
And so it does provide the goals for 1 year as well as a 3 to 5 year period around what it is we're focusing on in each of our content areas.
Good evening, Dr. Smith and your team. We appreciate the presentation. I just have several questions. I'd like to direct your attention to slide 7, where it identifies tiered support for staff. What does that look like for students?
As it relates to the Savas curricula,
Exactly.
resources?
What does it look like for the individual reading plan?
Sure.
What does tier instruction look like for students who are using this document?
No, sure. And so one of the things that you heard Dr. Moody talk about is tier 1 is everyone. We'd like to capture at least 80% of our scholars with tier 1 instruction. And so that is using the Savas curricula as it's outlined. Then tier 2 would be those identified scholars that are receiving or that are demonstrating deficiencies, either 1 grade level below or 2 grade levels below. The individual reading success plan outlines the specific focus areas. So it may be small groups, or it oftentimes is small groups. And then that is for a specific amount of time, and they're working on particular content areas, whether that's phonics, that's phonemic awareness, that's vocabulary, that's comprehension. And then a tier 3 would be individualized. So now it's really like maybe 1 or 2 working on some intensive supports that are identified through the assessments that they have in the Savas curricula resource, if that helps. I'm not sure.
Okay, I just have a follow-up question.
Sure.
If this document, the individual plan is being shared with students and parents, is it friendly for them? And the reason why I say that, I'm looking at it, a sample of it at the end of this handout,
Correct.
and I see CFA number 1. I don't think a student or parent would understand what that is. And so how can we make it friendly?
No,
if we're-
absolutely.
If we're using this for students and their parents.
Oh, absolutely. And so one point of clarification there, what you have there is an example of what that looks like that outlines the actual frame of what that intervention would look like for tier 2. So that's really more so for the teacher to understand that they're using CFAs, our common formative assessments, our common summative assessments. And then the second phase of this particular work that you heard me talk about a little bit earlier was now getting families involved. And now how do we make that user-friendly for them? So here is what we're going to be doing to progress monitor. Here are these CFAs, CSAs, and here is what this actually looks like. So phase 1 is what we wanted to present to you today. So you have a deeper understanding that there is a clear plan and a structure for the targeted supports. And phase 2 will then be, I need to talk to Marianne's mom, dad, caregiver to then say, this is the structure, but here is what it needs to look like for you within that structure.
And so what we have before us is the teacher document. We don't have a student document.
Well, that's the one that the teacher uses to inform, and then they'll modify that so that when the parents have that or family or caregiver has that information, it speaks specifically to what they talk about in that conversation. So I would say it's a combination of both. And so there will be no second document. It is just making sure that you understood that there is a frame. And then the second phase would then be getting families involved in that conversation around what that looks like.
Okay, I just want to press you a little further on that.
Sure.
What does the student's document look like? If we're putting this in the hand of a student to say, hey, this is where you are, this is where we want you to go.
Mhm.
It can't look like this document.
I would agree, correct.
Okay, so I'm looking for something that's friendly for students and their parents.
No, absolutely. So we can create that easily.
And I'd like to direct your attention to slide 9 and 10. Will the office at some point identify specific skills that the students need particular help with? You have percentages here. But will students know what they need to work on?
Specifically in literacy, yes. And
In
so those
literacy.
are some of those items that are identified on the individual reading success plan. So I mentioned a few of those. Oftentimes in grades 3, 4, 5, we're working on the big 5. So phonics, phonemic awareness, vocabulary, comprehension, and fluency. And if they're outside of that area, we would identify those just based on the assessments that they're taking periodically.
Okay, so the student will get a document that says that they need additional work on whatever you just said.
And so it's communicated to the scholar, yes. Mhm.
Are there any opportunities for extended learning time? Before school, after school, or as a part of the virtual platform? Will there be any additional opportunities for students to be supported?
I would say yes. And so right now, it just depends on individual schools. And so we're working on what that could look like. And that's how we're going to, some of our schools are leveraging just ESSER II funding to be able to support what that looks like.
In regards to the reading teachers, are we using a push-in model or a pull-out model or a combination?
I like these questions. And so I can tell that you are a former educator. And so like, I'm excited about being able to recenter learning and teaching with an emphasis on learning in the conversation. So it's a combination of both, depending on the school, depending on the need. There may be one day where Marianne needs like pull out because of the content area. There may be certain times on another day where there's push in because we want that particular scholar to have whole class instruction before we pull out to work on those particular needs.
And I'm only asking that because we're on a dual track here. We're trying to catch up and we're trying to accelerate.
Absolutely.
So I'm just wondering what kind of opportunities you're providing.
Absolutely. And so that's what it looks like, is being able to look at what does this particular scholar need? And in that moment, developing those plans to say, we need to be present for this whole group instruction. And now the very next day or whatever the content is, we need to pull because I'm seeing that you may be struggling or missing the mark here. So I need to pull you in a small group with other individuals that are struggling with this particular concept, or wow, I need one-on-one with you now because I know that we need more intensive supports. And so it looks very different. That's why it really is that individual reading success plan. And it's based on our reading intervention teachers really understanding all of those scholars and what their needs are, and then working with the classroom teachers to develop what that needs to look like on a rotating basis.
Okay.
Dr. Roberts, can I add to what you're asking? Because I'm curious with what you're saying. What obstacles, given what we're dealing with the pandemic, and what you're saying, it really sounds good. But let's be honest, like, what obstacles are you all faced with at this time? Because I mean, we're dealing with trying to staff them. You know, it's just a lot. So I'm just curious, what obstacles are you all faced in trying to get this successfully going?
Well, I would say that it's being implemented successfully now within the target that we're focusing on, specifically grades 3, 4, 5. We wanted to use this as an exemplar of how to do this really well before the state requirement of July 2022, where we have to have individual reading success plans for every one of our scholars that qualify because they're 1 grade level, 2 grade levels, or even more behind, right? And so it is just every school district, I would say. So we're not any different. It's just simply staffing, right? And so if we don't have the staff outside of grades 3, 4, 5, we're very specific that that's our target. But the data that we would be able to provide shows that there are grade levels outside of this where we have scholars who are below grade level, right? And so what's happening in that space is we may not have the staffing for that, right?
Right. So what I'm saying, everything you saying, given the nature of what we're dealing with right now, being like, if I'm in a school, I would think some of your obstacles that you may have is not having that outside support to kind of come in and lean into the challenges. Because if, say, I'm an educator, I'm a teacher, and Johnny is struggling with the reading level he's doing, and I know Johnny need the help, but right now I'm trying to control Johnny, Betty, Sue, so on and so forth. And reading is just, even though we know it's urgent, but that's what I'm asking, like,
Mhm.
what obstacles are you all really struggling with to try to make sure we're reaching what we're trying to reach?
I think I would have to think about that because there's a plethora of obstacles just depending on what it is that we're trying to do, right? So that's the community involvement, that is staffing. So it's just all of those things that are not indicative specifically to the work that we're trying to do. It's just a part of what's happening right now just because of we're navigating and trying to learn and teach in this pandemic space. And so I know that may not answer the question, but there aren't any specific things that I could point to say, because we don't have access to XYZ, it's preventing us from, outside of we need the bodies, the staffing, the people who are certified in these areas. And we're collaborating quite diligently with human resources to try to do that. But we understand that at the end of the day, I've heard people say before, like the cavalry isn't coming in, right? So we have to work with what we have, and what we have is really using our curriculum specialists that are in the academic office. We're utilizing our reading specialists in grades 3 through 5 to serve as a model, then to replicate that at the other grades, and then being able to work with our leaders in the academic office who are in those content areas as well to move that particular work forward. And so we're trying to work within the parameters that we do have, and move away from this would be nice to have, but we know that that's not our reality right now.
I have two final questions, I promise. And Dr. Adams, I think the first one goes to you. On page 11, there was some mention about a mandate from the Senate around individual reading plans. Is that a new mandate or a continuation of something that's been in place over time?
That's a new mandate for next school year. That is a new mandate. We've always had a mandate around grades 3 and 4, and so they've extended that mandate. Students not reading on level, we were supposed to provide interventions during the summer and mandatory summer school, specifically to St. Louis Public School District.
Okay, so if I heard you correctly, you said it's an extension of something that's been in place?
So the
Oh.
previous mandate was, and I can't think of what the Senate bill was. What is it again? 319, it was specific to grades 3 and 4. Is that 3 and 4, second and third? 3 and 4 for summer school. For those students who are not reading on grade level, they had to have mandatory summer school.
Okay,
And so the extension is to look at now grades 3, 4, and 5 with IRSP, individual reading success plans.
thank you.
You're welcome.
That's my final question.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. And again, the board has asked for an update every single board meeting on academics. So academics will be brought back before the board every single meeting. Today was around literacy, and to give you some update, took a little bit longer time, but this was the first time, but they'll be coming back with college and career and other areas in academics to walk through the board for what's happening. CPN, Mr. Hartman, please.
There we go. Good evening. My name is Jay Hartman. I am the director of the consortium.
I need you to talk a little bit closer to it, please.
Yep.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. Good now. I'm Jay Hartman, and I am the director of the Consortium Partnership Network Schools. And so I am excited to be here, and I thank you for the invitation to give you an update on our work. When CPN was started in 2018, the mission was to dramatically improve school performance by providing schools with a new governance model that would enable greater autonomy, flexibility, and strengthen community voice. So I will talk through what we have attempted to meet that goal. And you'll see that the The purpose has shifted a little bit, but we'll talk through the board and the leadership, a little bit of the history of it, our leadership teams and the compelling purposes of the schools, as well as a few spotlights, partnership, and then a reflection on data as well. So as CPN has evolved, we have arrived on 3 key purposes, and we are focused on equitable outcomes. We serve neighborhood schools. Merrimack and Ashland are both neighborhood elementary schools, and that is where we typically see that there is a great need for resources. And so we are trying to provide additional support and resources where they are needed the most. CPN is designed to empower teachers, and that is not just in the performative way of empowering teachers, as it often can be, but we have school leadership teams that are elected by their peers. And so they really do drive decision-making and create more autonomy for the schools. And our goal is to support those first 2 by helping learn about the effectiveness of those first 2 purposes and support the school district in scaling any of the things that work with empowering teachers and providing more resources. So our board membership, a few people that you are familiar with. Our board president is Dr. Dowden White. She was appointed by the St. Louis Board of Aldermen. We have a parent representative, and then Dr. Roberts, Dr. Adams, and Mr. Marcus Robinson, who was appointed by the mayor of St. Louis to this board. This is our school leadership. Dr. Bodie is a principal at Ashland. Mr. Strong, who you have heard about already tonight, is a principal at Merrimack. Another shout out to Mr. Strong. We're excited about that. The AICs, the instructional coaches, who you've heard about as well, and then a couple staff members for CPN, a data strategist, as well as a curriculum and instruction director who is really focused on coaching math this year. A bit about the timeline. So in fall of 2018, CPN incorporated as a nonprofit and entered into partnership, into negotiations and partnership with the district at that point, which is when in the winter, Ashland and Merrimack were selected to be CPN schools. In the spring of 2019, they embarked on a 3-year development plan to improve outcomes at their schools. And in the summer of 2019 is when I was brought in to begin supporting these schools from a CPN staffing standpoint. We immediately adopted a new reading curriculum in the fall of 2019. So we are in year 3 of that implementation. Leadership teams at each school began doing training in earnest in the winter of 2020. In the fall of 2020, last fall, we're proud that Merrimack was the first school to raise their hand and say, we want to bring kids back in person in the middle of the pandemic. And so they were the first one to do that. And it allowed the district to learn from some of our mistakes, as well as learn from some of the things that went well. You've seen the STEM lab at Merrimack already highlighted tonight. That is a process that's happening at both schools. And so that's something that we're proud of on the innovative side. And then this past summer, in the summer of 2021, our teachers and staff from both schools embarked on a week-long training in what is called place-based learning. And I'll explain a little bit more about that. So those are just a couple of the highlights of our timeline. So I mentioned the leadership teams. These are truly our teacher leaders who are voted upon by their peers that represent all areas of the building. So this could be somebody from the early childhood area, middle grades, special education, support staff, and they engage in professional development as a team. They hold regular meetings. They support the leaders in executing on the improvement plan. So that's when I say it's not just performative teacher empowerment, it is true. They are voted on and they are very, very engaged in the decision-making. And so by giving teachers, the people who are closest to the kids, a lot of decision-making authority, it is our hope that we will provide the best possible outcomes for kids. As a part of that leadership process, both schools have developed what we call a compelling purpose. They engaged in training in appreciative inquiry over the past year. And so this is just an example of what it looks like at Ashland. Ashland really seeks to be a hub for their community, which is something that is admirable. And And now, I was just telling a couple colleagues today that in the example of they have some flexible spending for ESSER dollars coming up. Now Ashland has been through this compelling purpose process and they know as a staff exactly how they are going to go about that process. And so that's an exciting thing. Here, Merrimack, you can see a couple of the call outs that you see for Merrimack is that they want to really develop hands-on learners. You'll see that again in the STEM lab shout out. So this is staff going above and beyond just developing a mission and vision, but saying this is why we exist as a school. And especially for a neighborhood school, a neighborhood elementary school that doesn't have the advantage of being a magnet school or other built-in advantages. This is a really critical thing for developing coherence for our schools. A couple of the partnerships that we work with as a CPN staff to support the schools in their goals. We work closely with WashU Institute of School Partnership. They support us with science curriculum. They supported us with place-based learning training. Instruction Partners is an organization that helps us provide feedback and training on tier 1 and math and reading instruction. We do a lot of social emotional support work with the Cigna Foundation, the Little Bit Foundation, and Hopewell. We have a grocery store at Ashland that is free for parents to come up and get fresh groceries. We have an embedded therapist at Ashland that is funded by the Cigna Foundation as well. We work closely with the St. Louis Community Foundation, as well as we are very grateful for the St. Louis Public Schools Foundation. It was mentioned earlier that they help support the innovation grant at Merrimack, as well as they operate as a fiscal partner. The STEM lab was brought up. This is just to explain where that came from. This came from a parent focus group. We had a parent focus group at Merrimack 2 years ago. We heard from parents. They said, we want our kids doing robotics. We want them prepared for the 21st century. And so we started this process. And so it's a work in progress, but we do hope that it is something that is scalable and sustainable for other neighborhood elementary schools or any schools to do as well. And kids are really enjoying it, and we're really proud of that work. I mentioned place-based learning. So if you think of the phrase project-based learning, but you incorporate community-based education as well, that is in short what place-based learning means. So our teachers and staff did a training this summer. They engaged in a lot of community-based learning opportunities themselves as teachers so that they could help shift their lens for what they need to do for students. And then during this school year, they have been writing additional unit plans and lesson plans focused especially in science and social studies. We call it the inquiry block, and it is truly developing new opportunities for student advocacy. Kids are really engaged in that portion of their day. I do want to note a spotlight on math instruction. I will share some single point in time data later, and you may see trends when you look at academic outcomes that oftentimes we have for the right reason, we have a deep focus on reading, but we also struggle sometimes in math. And so we have done a lot of work in math this year, especially when it comes to just-in-time planning. And so having a staff member who is dedicated to coaching and supporting our math teachers has been critical this year. As you know that most of our AICs and reading specialists have a really strong reading background. And so having that extra support staff to be dedicated towards math has really alleviated some of their stress and allowed our teachers to grow. I do want to spotlight social and emotional support services. We mentioned the embedded therapist. Both schools have also done district-led trauma-informed programming, and that is like with the student support team. We have graciously been given funding by Cigna. We have partnerships with Hopewell, SLU's Shut It Down program, as well as a Little Bit Foundation helping support in all of those endeavors. I want to call out quickly parent feedback. We do a lot of parent surveys at our schools, and so you can see a little bit of data there. And again, continuing in that process of engaging and hearing from parents what it is that they're interested in. This was a recent parent focus group that we had at Ashland. I do want to name this one thing, and I think this may have been a last minute addition. So when I'm talking about data, I want to frame the data because at a neighborhood elementary school, we often have very high rates of mobility. And so having a data strategist on staff has been able to help us really dig into what that mobility data looks like. Because if we look at single point in time academic data, but 40 to 60% of those students are not going to be there the next year, we may not necessarily learn what we need to learn from that. And so we have a little bit of preliminary results, but you will see I want to call out the last bullet point, which is that the trend that we see at Ashland and Merrimack is that when students are enrolled in those schools for more than 2 years, then they are most likely to stay for the long term. But we have a really high mobility rate among students who are just there for 1 or 2 years. And so identifying the appropriate academic interventions for those students is proven to be very difficult. And so it's something that we hope to continue to figure out as we go. A quick non-academic outcomes. You can see that attendance is a challenge this year. We have a lot of quarantines. Enrollment has actually gone up at Ashland. It's likely due to school closures near it. But that's a good thing for a neighborhood elementary school to have enrollment go up. Merrimack has remained steady over the last few years. And then I want to briefly touch on these academic outcomes. You can see the trend in math. This is just fall data. This is all grade levels averaged together. And so you can see what we're up against and the growth that is required. Having 17% of students, being proficient in reading, but only single-digit % proficient in math is really serious, and we need to do a lot of work. So this is an example of how we are approaching goal setting. You can imagine this little sheet inside of a sheet protector and a student getting to draw on there with a vis-a-vis marker or like a whiteboard marker, okay? And so then I'm gonna blow this up on the next slide. So it's a little easier to see color-coded, but I'll take a minute to explain this graph and then of course, ask questions, please. On the left-hand side of this graph is the scale score that kids get for taking the STAR test. On the right-hand side is the grade equivalent that they get. The color codings though, however, are like the relationship between that scale score and your MAP proficiency, okay? So if we go back 2 slides, you'll see that most students are being labeled as not proficient. And so that would put them in the red area of this chart. And so when we sit down and have conversations with students about their growth goals, their individual growth goals, we can chart multiple lines and say, you are going to take the STAR test 3 times this year. And so this represents, 4 STAR tests if you include 2 different springs. And we can help students understand that you need to have a higher, rate of change in your scores in order to improve your chances at getting into the yellow. And when you see that red is so big, because you actually have to be above grade level according to STAR in order to be predicted as passing or being on grade level and the Missouri MAP test. That's a discussion for another day, but it can be discouraging. And so by setting individual goal trajectories for students and getting their teachers invested in those, getting the students and parents invested in those, our hope is that we will see more significant growth, and we will be able to celebrate the growth from below basic to basic, because that in and of itself is really, really critical. This is an example of how we track those goals by classrooms. So this is just an example. This is just a screenshot of a dashboard that we use to track these goals kind of collectively among teachers, so that teachers, again, can be really invested in those goals. Okay, I went quick so you can ask questions.
Yeah, I had a question around, I appreciate that you're reaching out to parents. I guess I want to make sure that we're using a lot of different methods of contact and being very cognizant of the technology gap that exists in those communities. A lot of parents don't have the same phone number month to month, and a lot of people don't have internet access. How are we making sure our students and parents have access to technology, that they are being reached? And I guess Why were there only 58 parents who responded if we have about 400 total enrollment of students in both those schools?
Right. Great question. So that was just one form of survey. We use ClassDojo, we use email, Teams. So that was just one particular survey that only that number of parents responded to. But that was a discussion that we just had with the student support team at Ashland today, was we need to revamp all the ClassDojo numbers because numbers are changing from the beginning of the year. So absolutely.
So are we doing any paper or phone outreach to those parents to make sure they have access as well?
Yep.
Okay, cool. And the other question was, I lost it. You can come back to me.
Yep, no problem.
I have a question, please. The CPN, you said was started back in 2018, and I'd like to know exactly what is your legal name, the legal name of the school in Jefferson City? You say CPN Consortium Partnership Network, but isn't that don't you have another name for this school?
It is registered with the state of Missouri as a nonprofit, as a Consortium Partnership Network Incorporated, Inc., I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Adams.
That's correct.
Okay.
So it is Consortium Partnership Network.
So St. Louis Public Schools name is not on your listing in Jefferson City?
They are an independent 501c3 that supports these two schools. So they're not necessarily aligned. They're literally a 501c3 that's supporting these two schools. So they're not part of the school district formally.
But they are a nonprofit that gets public funding from St. Louis Public School, right?
They get no funding from the St. Louis Public School District.
I thought that we provided monies for their professional development and things like that. I thought I saw that.
We provide that to the school specifically, but not to the 501c3.
Right, so to the school. but-
Right.
Okay.
Like we
so-
do all schools, but we don't give any money to the CPN.
Right, but to the schools, which
Yes,
is the
ma'am.
CPN. Okay, so I would like to understand or help everybody to understand what the CPN was put together for. What is the reason? I understand that you talked about teachers being more independent or what have you, but also you talked about a new governance model. And that was very concerning to me as an elected person. I know that you don't have an elected school board, but you have another decision-making tool there. Would you explain that, please?
Yes. So the piece that I wanted to highlight first was the actual elected teacher leadership teams at the schools. And so that is the hope, is that by creating more opportunity for teachers to make autonomous decisions at the school-based level, that it will improve outcomes. So that's one. But then you're right. It's the separate board for the nonprofit that, as Dr. Adams just mentioned, that is the idea of a new governance model of having a nonprofit board that supports a small group of schools that are working in partnership with the district.
So it really doesn't give an opportunity for parents to have input other than what you've just spoken about earlier. Like a elected board, if people are dissatisfied with what's going on, they can't just.
Yeah, okay, I understand your question. So we actually have one parent who is on the board of an Ashland student, so that is helpful. That doesn't solve everything by any means. But our board meetings are also open to the public in the same way that the school board meetings are. And so there is always an opportunity for anyone to attend and are welcome to speak.
I guess I was a
share with
little
the board.
surprised with your answer because I've constantly been looking on the website of the district to look for updates and I would see nothing. So where are you putting out your information for your meetings? Because I don't see anything at all. This is the first one for over a year or so.
Yeah, we post our board meeting agenda and invite anytime that we have quarterly CPN board meetings. And whenever we have a meeting, it is always posted to the district website as well as posted physically in the same locations that the school board meetings are posted.
Thank you.
I found my other question. So 75% of the parents are satisfied with their students' education. What are you getting back from the other 25%? Is it that they were not reachable or that they had specific concerns? And do you have a plan for addressing that?
Yeah, in the most recent round of survey, it was frustrations with quarantine. And so following up around communication, ensuring that teachers are clearly communicating when they are doing hybrid teaching, holding office hours. So that was that particular situation that we responded to. And so that's the advantage of doing surveys frequently, is that you can get that feedback back quickly and respond to it.
So historically, what other issues have caused frustrations or dissatisfaction among parents? I mean, I know the pandemic is going to be kind of the headline item for everything right now, but like 2019 or 2018, what were kind of some of your first frustrations that parents expressed, and how were you able to overcome them?
I wouldn't say that we've been doing as many surveys as we have since last year. We understood the importance of it, especially with distance teaching. So I going back to 2018, I probably wouldn't be able to say, but frustrations sometimes with updating grades. That's been sometimes a challenge in like helping parents get onto the parent portal so that they could see the grade book. So it involves a technology training for both the parents and the teachers. I think that sometimes there are other frustrations that arise that are just like pretty standard school frustrations of student discipline, follow-up, things like that. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
I just kind of have two questions, and they're sort of related, so I'll ask them both at the same time. I guess, does this governance model give you the level of autonomy, flexibility, and community voice that you need? Or is the way it's structured still not autonomous, flexible enough? And then the second part of that question would be, is there anything in the traditional governance model that would prevent taking the successes that you've had in autonomy and flexibility, teacher satisfaction, which I assume is part of this as well, and implementing that in neighborhood schools under our governance model?
Can I answer the second question first? So I don't think that there is anything preventing it. I think that is the hope. And so related to the first question, could we have more autonomy? Yes, of course. But I think this is intended to be a partnership. And so our goal is to follow the lead of the board. And if this is a partnership that the board likes and wants to lean into, great. Maybe more autonomy in order to explore if it works is good. If the board wants to dial some of that back and say, this isn't a partnership that seems to be mutually beneficial, then I think that's why we're here. That's why I'm here to update you guys. We want to work in partnership, and we hope to just be good stewards of the resources and that autonomy. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, and maybe this is for Dr. Adams. Is there a time frame where we consider renewing this or adjusting it?
So the CPN is in place until June 2022. It renews unless the board takes some action otherwise. Am I correct, Mr. Senator? I just want to make sure I'm correct. So that's, I think the idea would be that if the board has some inklings not to do so, that we know as early as possible. A lot has gone into this effort. I would recommend that the board does support the notion of the renewal of the CPN. If that is not the board's recommendation, we have had 2 years of total chaos around the pandemic, and at least the extension of 2 more years to get the data that we probably did not get and statewide, not just district-wide, in this particular effort, but it will be my hope that the board will continue the CPN for at least another 3 years. And the board is not making a decision tonight. I'm not bringing anything before the board. This is an update. Dr. Roberts requested an update at this point in time. We'll likely come back in March when we have a little bit more data and can have a robust conversation around that, but I am not making a recommendation tonight.
I have, Dr. Roberts, can I ask? I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying, Dr. Adams. So it's safe to say that you will come back to give us more updates, because this is kind of, in my opinion, an introductory as to where you are and what you guys have been doing. But I'm just curious, especially before voting to extend into another 3 years, to really dig a little bit more into what it is you guys are really doing. I think one of the biggest issues, not issues, but something that's kind of a red flag was what the same thing Ms. Val is saying, that you only had 58 parents in regards to that survey. So it's kind of not enough to really see out of 400 or some odd families that you're really dealing with to only get input. I wish I would have gotten more feedback in the other levels, but I get the pandemic probably kind of stalled that.
Sure.
I just like to say, I just think it's unfortunate that we've spent so much money to continue this program, because I don't think these scores at Merrimack or the other school has been any better than some of the St. Louis public schools. And I think we wasted a lot of time, because in the past, St. Louis Public School has done a lot of the things that you're doing right now. And they stopped, and they should have continued on. And this was before Dr. Adams came, so he probably doesn't know. But St. Louis Public School was doing the very same thing, and they should continue what they were doing. And I just think it's pouring money down a rabbit hole. And I mean, really, I just really never understood taking power away from parents to have more of a say-so in what's going on in their school district. And I wish you guys the best, but I'm really disappointed in what's being done with the CPN. And I did not see the updates, and I constantly looked as a board meeting, and I was never really updated on anything that you guys were doing. So that's just the way I'm thinking.
So just a point of clarity. We have not provided any money to the CPN. All monies that the CPN uses are their own school dollars that the leadership team decides how they want to spend them. Any contract that the CPN requests has to be approved by the board. So if materials are being purchased, the board has to approve it. I bring it before the board, and this board approves it. So they make recommendations to the board. The board approves the item based upon the leadership team making a recommendation. Any independent dollars that come in might cover Mr. Hartman's salary and any other initiatives that are outside of the district's auspice. So the district has not put one penny into the CPN that's not already aligned to the school's account, and the school makes a recommendation. We bring it before the board, and the board approves it. The new curriculum that they're using, this board approved it based upon the leadership team making a recommendation to Mr. Hartman, them coming before the 5 members of the board, myself, Dr. Roberts, Marcus Robertson, and the other 2 persons, and then that recommendation came before the board. So I just want to provide some clarity, because no dollars from this board have been provided to the CPN as an independent.
I understand that, Dr. Adams, but I was concerned because you see here where St. Louis Public School Foundations and all the organizations that normally donate things to St. Louis Public School students, and I know that they have St. Louis Public School students at Merrimack and at the other school. So those things could have gone back into our program and to make our students strong as well and to improve, because I just feel real disappointed, because we did close schools that had the same scores that your school did. And you guys got to keep on and keep getting money from St. Louis Public School Foundation. So that's just where I'm at, and that's just my personal opinion.
Yes, ma'am. And again, the faculty, the staff get paid by the district. The insurance benefits are covered by the district. The liability insurance is covered by the district. They're our schools. They're not separate from the district in any way, shape, or form. Every single thing that happens at a school that's not Merrimack and Ashland happens at that school, except that the leadership team makes the recommendations and then brings them to the board, and additional resources that come and support those schools are outside dollars that come and support those two particular schools. So I totally understand where you are, Ms. Jones, and I totally understand it and get it, but I just kind of want to provide some clarity so the public is not confused about what's actually happening here, because we're not giving any money to the CPN at this point in time.
I just want to ask a question to make sure that I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah.
So these are SLPS schools and
Yes.
they, these are our staff, but the goal of the CPN is to allow for our staff within the district and also parents within the district that want to kind of have more experiment with other types of education that might not be in our typical SLPS traditional schools, but still have an accountability ultimately to the district. Like, these are a part of our district, but this is an opportunity for staff and parents and community to say, like, okay, we think parents are saying they want to learn more about Black history. Then you guys can like take that data and then figure out how you can put that in the curriculum and kind of see what works and allow for that avenue. Is that a correct understanding?
Yes, that's exactly right.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because I actually think that that's very important, because I think that a lot of the staff that we lose in the district goes on to other organizations that are not SLPS affiliated, so that they can have an opportunity to see, other models. And also parents sometimes go to these other, educational choices because they want to see if I want more social justice or if I want more STEM or whatever it is that they're specifically looking for. And so I think that the CPN is a good thing because it allows us to see if that works. And ultimately, it's still accountable to us. These are still our schools, these are still our students and still our staff, but you guys help manage make sure you know what they want and what they're looking into.
Right.
Okay.
Ms. Sonia, it's a little bit different. I understand exactly what you're saying and I respect that, but we still have the issue of governance. And that was the main focus for me, governance. It was looking for a new governance model. And it's not the same as our governance model. So it was trying to change the governance model. And they are not responsible to us because they are not for profit.
But they got to
So-
go through us for all of their.
No, they don't
right?
have to
They
go
can't-
through us for everything. No, they don't. That's why they get money from St. Louis Public School Foundation and these other organizations that they name. Dr. Adams just said that they get monies from these other organizations. They're not for profit. They don't have to go through us. They have another governing body other than us. They're not responsible to us.
And just a point of clarity, I do sit on that board
Right.
and I do challenge what goes on in terms of what the two schools are doing. And so it was important to have this meeting tonight. I encourage Dr. Adams and Jay to come to the table because we have new board members who are here and there has not been a presentation around the CPN.
Thank you, Ms. Altman. Mrs. Banks, the last presentation tonight is an update to the board relative to finances.
Good evening, Angie Banks, CFO. I'll be giving the monthly financial update for the month of October. Here are our financial objectives. Briefly, they're to maintain full accreditation, align our resources with the transformation plan, maintain long-term financial stability. And as you know, we amended this fund balance policy so that we're at a 30% fund balance and to reinforce a culture of high expectations and accountability. So on the long-term financial stability, at the end of fiscal year 20, we were at about a 34% fund balance. We're not complete with our audit yet, but I anticipate that we will be at about a maybe 38 or 40% fund balance at that point. And as you are aware, at the last tax levy, we had a voluntary reduction of 6.7 cents per $100 of assessed valuation, which saved the taxpayers about $3 million. And especially as we're looking at all these ESSER funds that we'll be receiving over the next couple years, in total about $160 million. We certainly do anticipate that it's going to have an impact on our fund balance, but that's a part of the strategy because as these funds roll off in fiscal year 25, we plan to be able to fund some of the programs that we're coming up with now, whether they be the academic programs that were presented today, technology refreshes and things like that. So that's a part of the strategy. So our agenda for today, we'll have a COVID-19 update, go through the ESSER spending year to date, talk about the specific October year-to-date preliminary results, have a financial outlook, and of course, answer any questions that you might have. Regarding COVID-19, the Emergency Connectivity Fund, or E-rate, the district received approval for the reimbursement of the cellular service for 12,000 iPads and 3,200 hotspots, which comes out to be about $2.3 million. This is a new initiative provided by the federal E-rate funding. What we do is pay the cost up front, about $182,000 monthly for the service, and we receive about a 90% reimbursement. The district may also be applying for reimbursement of similar services for last year if the FCC indicates that there's additional monies available from the original $7.1 billion budget. We have not received any additional information on the homeless funding. We've contacted DESE and we're awaiting information. But regarding the recruitment and retention $2 million grant, this is part of the state's ESSER allocation, and it's really based on a 2020 national survey that identified 77% of educators working more today than they were a year ago. 60% of the educators enjoy their jobs less. 59% do not feel secure with the health and safety precautions. 27% say they're considering leaving their job, retiring early, or taking a leave of absence. And of course, we have experienced that. The focus is on teacher recruitment and grow your own programs. Of course, we've been doing some of this in prior years, particularly with the support of the Parsons Blewett program. And allowable expenses fall into 4 major categories: partnerships, recruitment and selection, preparation and support, and evaluation. There are regional assistants to help the school districts plan for this $2 million grant, and I believe our regional assistant is Education Plus. The American Rescue Plan, or ESSER 3. There were two parts to the application, which was submitted on August 23rd, a narrative section and a finance section. We did receive feedback from DESE on early October, and the application should be approved once those corrections are made. And then, of course, we'll be going into ESSER on the next slide. We've spent about 2% of the $46 million in ESSER in the categories shown, primarily in student learning and safe return. There's been an awful lot of planning that's been going on over the last several months to make sure that the resources are aligned properly to support staff and students. School plans, as you know, represents about 55% of the ESSER 2 allocation. And there's just been a tremendous amount of work that's been going on, and the schools sharing the plans with their school communities. We intend to roll out the budgets this week. So we're really looking forward to getting that information out and start to spending those funds. So October, the revenues are still property and sales tax heavy, with some state formula revenue, and food service reimbursements in breakfast and lunch. And I've included some of the larger expenditures by category, including some of the primary vendors and high-level detail. Many of these expenditures will repeat month after month. So for our October revenues, we received about $8 million in October, $24 million year to date, or 6.3% of the revenue budget. You'll note that we only received about 5.5% of our local revenue, which represents about 75% of the total revenue budget. December and January is where we receive about 90% of the local property tax revenues. You'll see under the federal category, we have not received much, no title reimbursements yet, but we think that starting in November, some of those federal reimbursements will start to roll in. Our October expenditures, we've spent $37.2 million in October, $79.8 million year to date, or 20.9% of the expenditure budget. October did have 3 full pay periods for the month. And as you can see on the slide, the October salaries represented about the same amount as the first quarter salaries. We have 2 3 pay period months each fiscal year. This year it's October and April. There was a large adjustment to September that was presented last month. Of course, all this information for October, it's preliminary. It will be finalized. But in September, there was a $4.2 million interest payment at the end of the month that you'll note if you look at your last presentation. The long and short-term debt indicated that there was a negative $2 million amount, and now you see here it's $2.2 million. And that's the change that was reflected for the finals for September. So for our outlook, we're really looking forward to our budget forums for fiscal year 2023. They will be virtual once again this year. We have them scheduled all in December on the 2nd and the 9th at 6 p.m. and on a Saturday, the 18th at 9 a.m. That really concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Mrs. Banks?
Yes, I just have one. Can you help me on the homeless children and youth fund? You were saying you was waiting to hear back. What exactly are we trying to do with that?
Well, along with all of the, I guess, COVID funding, if you will, the state of Missouri received, I believe, 800, let's see. I don't know if it was $800 million. Not 800 million, 800,000, I'm sorry, $800,000 for $800,000 for homeless. So we've really been looking for some allocations to the districts. So we've reached out to DESE and we just have not gotten that feedback yet.
Any additional questions? Thank you, Ms. Banks.
Thank you.
I have one item that's not a presentation, but I provided it to the board and I'll walk through it at this point in time. In some conversations with the board members and the board also received a request. The board approved a renaming policy of facilities. And I would like to apply that policy at this point in time to CJA and provide the board with a timeline for renaming. Basically, when the board did the policy, we removed the name of Kennard from the school. I made a commitment to the PTO and the community as well that we will come back this school year to rename the school. Obviously, this school year took off in a very different way in August through November. And so I am asking that the board look at the renaming timeline that I provided basically are reviewing the board policy that you have tonight with you. I would ask that the board would name members of an advisory committee at the December 14 board meeting. That 4 members will be from the community that the board would name. 4 members will be from the parents that the PTO would name. There will be 4 staff persons from the school that will be recommended by the principal. And then the superintendent would name 3 district staff. The intent would be that in January, the committee would hold their first meeting, the second meeting in February, the third meeting in March, and then a recommendation would be made to the board in April for the renaming of what that naming might be. A lot of work took place over the last 2 years with the Kennard PTO and community in terms of coming up with names, and that data still could be used, although the board policy does not align itself with a quote unquote petition as what's done before, but it doesn't mean that they can't consider what was already done before as they look at this. So the board has the policy. I won't necessarily read it to the board at this point in time. You have a copy of it. I provided it to you. I would take any kind of questions that the board might have right now, but the board has total flexibility in terms of the advisory committee. I only came up with the 15 names, 15, it could be 12, it could be 8, it could be whatever number the board would want to have, but it gives the ability to have a large group and also for parents to be involved, for the staff to be involved, and obviously the board to come up with community members that might be part of that committee.
I appreciate this, Dr. Adams. As a former member of the Kennard PTO at one point, I would say this actually has been going on since 2015, and I think that that community is looking forward to
Some closure.
some closure
Yes,
and
sir.
renaming it.
Not hearing any other feedback, what I'd like the board to do is to come up with names at the next board meeting. And then the board can approve the 4 community members. I can start the process of reaching out to the PTO. I have not given them this document. Quite frankly, no one has seen the document except the board tonight. And I'll reach out to them tomorrow and get them to start the process so we can move forward. The latest time that the committee can make a recommendation will be April, but there's some designated things that the policy calls for in terms of meetings that they would have publicly such that the community can know what's going on. And we would obviously likely do that, some of that in virtual and some of that in person, but not hearing any other feedback from the board, I'll move forward with this recommendation. That concludes the superintendent's agenda, except for the consent agenda, Madam President.
I need a motion to accept the consent agenda and a second as presented, 1109-2101 through.
Dr. Roberts, I'd like to take 2 items separately, if that's all
Let me
right.
just finish this
Okay,
part,
sorry.
Then you can pull. Okay. Through, 1109-21-21. Now, Matt,
Yeah, sorry, Dr. Roberts. I'd like to take separately 1109-2106 and 1109-2120.
any other discussion?
I move that we accept the November consent agenda 1109-2101 through 1109-2105.
Second.
Ms. Williams, Ms. Sonier,
Yes.
Ms. Cousins,
Yes.
Ms. Ball,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Dr. Roberts. Yes. Motion passed.
I'd like to make a motion to approve 1109-2106.
Second.
I just wanted to take this separately, just to make sure that we understand what we're approving, because this is sort of a different scenario. So this is something, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Adams, but this is something that was part of a Board of Aldermen board bill for a tax incentive package given to this corporation, Deli Star, who's moving to the city of St. Louis. They had a factory in Illinois that experienced a fire. They were looking for a new location. They did a nationwide search. They ended up in St. Louis, where they had some other offices, and there has been a series of tax incentive packages provided by the state because it's workforce development eligible because they're bringing in new jobs to the city. But in addition to that, the city offered tax incentives which are going to affect our revenue. As we heard last time from SLDC's attorney, they didn't qualify for traditional tax abatement because the property is not blighted. So there's a unique thing that they did where they're issuing bonds. The city's actually going to own the building, lease it back to the company, and then not charge them taxes because the city would own the building and they don't have to pay the taxes. As part of that board bill, the Board of Aldermen included a provision that it was contingent on a memorandum of understanding, which is what we're talking about tonight, with St. Louis Public Schools. And so if I understand the incentives correctly, looking at it, it's going to cost us, the incentive package, about $1.6 million over the next 2 years. But the memorandum of understanding provides for them to donate $2,500 each year of those 10 years to the foundation. So we're giving up revenue. The foundation will be earning $25,000 while we're giving up $1.6 million. And then in addition, there's some other things that are included. I think they're going to offer 2 part-time internships to 2 of our students. And then there's some other things where they're going to participate in a job fair, and they're going to give priority review to applicants from St. Louis Public Schools. So I think I have summarized that all correctly. I just want to make sure that we understand this. As Dr. Adams said before, this is a new thing. This is a new sort of development under this new administration where they are looking for different sort of community benefit arrangements with their tax incentive packages. I mean, this wasn't something that this board was involved in terms of discussing. I have sort of asked at the last meeting, Dr. Adams, if we can, going forward, perhaps come up with a framework for if these community benefit arrangements and tax incentive packages are going to be part of these board bills, and there's going to be things that they're going to ask us to agree to accept, we should have a list of things that we want. I don't, again, think that this absolves the city in any way. I don't think that this is the alternative to what we've been asking for in our legislative priorities for many years, and we'll be talking about it again this year, that there needs to be tax incentive reform. There needs to be a framework with some caps, some predictability. So I just wanted to pull this off because we didn't have this full discussion of full transparency about what we are agreeing to.
Mr. Davis, you are exactly correct. The only thing I would add to your comments, which are 100% in line, in previous administrations, we were not even asked. And that's the real tragedy here, that we didn't have any discussion. They just automatically did this, and we didn't even know anything about what was occurring. So I think this is a small step in the right direction. But to your point, it doesn't obviously get us to the 1.6 that we're going to lose over the next 10 years.
I just have a question in regards to that. The statement I heard is that you're saying only 2 students. I just want to make sure I'm clear on that, because my assumption was it was more than 2 students as internships.
I think it's 2 every year for the next 10 years.
Just 2? It's 2. Okay. I was just making sure. I thought it was more than that, but okay.
It started out with 0.
Yeah, I just think, I think because it was our first time like being invited to the table, I think it's like, you know, a good faith effort, but I also I think our jobs is to make sure that just because we're invited to the table, we're not happy with just getting scraps per se. So just in the future, I think kind of what Matt's saying, like, especially like I'm on a TIF commission, we're working on the citywide educational plan. So some of the things that Matt said are things that we hope to come out of, but also I would love to figure out a way to have a board representative or somewhere a part of the process. Cause I'm really curious about how those negotiations and the back and forth talks, because $2,500 to students per year, you know, like I said, I think it's maybe a good faith effort since we're not used to being at the table at all. But I think certainly, like, you know, I don't want to be giving our students in our community the bare minimum.
No, I mean, I'm gonna vote for it. I just didn't want to say that, you know, that this absolves the city, that this needs to be the way that things need to go. Like Ms. Sonia said, you know, and what Dr. Adams said, scraps are more than we've been getting. But, you know, I don't want this to be the norm. I mean, honestly, the thing is, if we don't vote for it, they can go back and change the board bill and do it without us. I mean, this is a first thing, and I thank the alderwoman who did this and wasn't involved in the negotiations, at least thinking of it forward, because there have been other things that the administration has done where they vetoed bills and they have done community benefit agreements, and we weren't included at all. That money all went to Affordable Housing Trust or something like that, even though that was money that was directed to us. I mean, you know, the community approved these taxes. They've paid these taxes and they've approved these taxes to come to the school district to educate the children. It is the representatives of the community and these other boards that take those away to give these to private companies. And so, I mean, this is a discussion that we've been having as a school district. It's on our legislative priorities that we need to talk about. And I think we need to stand firm with this. I just wanted to pull this to have this conversation so they don't come back and say, well, you gave this to this company, so this is all you're going to get next time. So we need to be more proactive on this.
Ms. Sonier,
Yes.
Ms. Cousins,
Yes.
Ms. Fowle,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Dr. Roberts, motion passed. Were there any others?
1109-2107. This one has been, I'm sorry.
Make a motion to approve 1109-2107.
Second.
Can I go, Natalie? Okay. This one is been, I just want to make sure we have full understanding of what we're doing with this. St. Louis Youth Jobs, basically before we had approved to provide them 1.63 million for them to do jobs for our youth, for 600 youth. It's a service that's supposed to work in conjunction with our college and career readiness program. And it's for the first part of it is for 3 months. And now we're trying to approve to give them another 1.63 million for 3 more months of services. So it's just, I want to make sure that the board is fully understanding what this actually looks like. We have a college career readiness program. We have staff that are actually working. And I just think that we should have more data before we move forward to give an organization basically $3 million to provide, to help our kids get jobs for just 6 months.
So Ms. Cousins, is this an item you want further discussion on and not approved tonight on tonight's agenda?
Yes, ma'am.
Is there a second?
So wait, there was a motion on the table, a motion and a second to vote to approve this. So we need to vote on that, or the motion needs to be rescinded.
I rescind the motion.
It was, I will rescind the motion. Thank you.
So could I provide? I'm sorry. Could I provide a little clarity?
Yes.
Please, sir.
Okay, so I think there's 2 parts to this. We're approving the acceptance of funds and the use of funds. If the board is going to disconnect the two, I would rather the board accept the funds from the city and then come back for a conversation relative to the St. Louis Jobs as the vendor for this particular service. Your concern seems to be that as opposed to the acceptance of funds.
Exactly. So basically what you're saying is you're asking, just so I can make sure I understand and everyone, that we will accept the 1.63 from the city, but not provide our 1.63 from the school district.
The 1.6 from the school district has already been approved by the board. The
Okay,
board approved that for the first iteration of this initiative,
okay.
Learn and Earn, to the entity that you just indicated.
Mhm,
The city is providing us another 1.6
exactly.
with the idea that we continue the Learning Earn program.
Mhm,
The question you have is a question of the vendor
mhm.
being the entity that provides that support or service to extend.
Yes.
What I like to do is accept the money. I don't ever want to turn away $1.6 million
Mhm.
and then come back and have some conversation with the city about,
Who the vendor would be.
there you go.
I don't have a problem with that.
We have the ability to go back on RFP again and look at other vendors if that's something that we choose to do. But the acceptance of the funds is what I want to do. And if we decide to have some other vendor provide that extension, if you talked about it, then that's what I don't have a problem doing, but I don't want to turn away the 1.6
No,
million.
totally agree.
So I would like to make the motion that we approve the acceptance of funds from the city of St. Louis in the amount of $1.637.783.92 dollars to support, I guess it would be college and career readiness and leave it at that.
Second.
Ms. Sonier?
Yes.
Ms. Cousins?
Yes.
Ms. Bowles?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts?
Yes.
Motion passed.
I'll make a motion to approve 1109-2108 through and including 1109-2119.
Second.
I think Dr. Roberts pulled 15. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry, you're correct. No, I thought she pulled Item 1109-2115.
She didn't pull anything.
She did not?
No.
Well, I'm gonna ask that you pull 15.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
I will rescind my motion and make a motion to approve 1109-2108 up to and including 1109-2114.
Second.
Question? Do we have to vote or can I have this question? Okay. The confusion is, to me, is that we have two motions, one that was on the consent agenda and a revised one. And so are we pulling the one on the consent agenda and replacing it with the revised?
Yeah, you're
15,
you're
that's-
talking 15. That's why I asked to be, that's why I asked to be pulled.
Okay,
All right.
all right. Let's take the vote for those. Ms. Sonier?
Yes.
Ms. Cousins?
Yes.
Ms. Bowles?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts?
Yeah.
Motion passed.
And so for 1109-2115, I'm asking that the cost will increase by 200,000 as opposed to 6,000. This is DocuSign, the ability to give parents the ability to sign up for vaccinations online, as well as IEPs being done online. So that cost is much more increased than the 6,000 that was only originally thought about for human resources persons to sign contracts. So in the age of technology, the DocuSign gives us the ability for parents to do this online as opposed to coming in the buildings for IEPs. The vaccination piece, parents can sign this Saturday if they want to online, so they could do the vaccination as opposed to coming to actual buildings. So that's the reason for the increase from 6,000 to 20,000 for a total cost of $240,000.
I'll make a motion to approve 1109-2115 as amended by Dr. Adams.
Second.
Ms. Williams? Ms. Sonier?
Yes.
So just a point of order, we do need to actually, for the clarity of the motion in the minutes, we do need to actually clarify those numbers. So from 6,000 to 20,000 and for a total amount of,
240,000.
sorry, yeah.
Yeah, it came out in an email on Monday, 11/8/2021,
Yes.
the adjusted amounts.
Just want to make sure that's in the actual. motion.
Okay, so, okay.
They want him to say the amount.
Mhm.
Sorry, Matt.
Give me those amounts again, I'm sorry.
Here.
I don't have
Sit
the,
down so
do you,
you can
oh,
read.
thank you. Okay, my new motion is to approve 1109-2115 as amended by Dr. Adams to approve an amendment to a contract renewal with DocuSign to increase the cost by 200,000. It will increase the contract amount to 240,000.
Second.
Ms. Williams.
Ms. Sonier,
Yes.
Ms. Cousins.
Yes.
Ms. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes,
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Dr. Roberts.
Yes.
Motion passed.
I'll make a motion to approve 1109-2116 through 1109-2119.
Second.
Ms. Williams.
Ms. Sonier,
Yes.
Ms. Cousins.
Yes.
Ms. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes,
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Dr. Roberts.
Yes.
Motion passed.
make a motion to approve 1109-2120.
Second.
I just wanted to pull this because I wasn't comfortable approving a $30 million contract in the consent agenda. But this is to approve a contract with North American Central School Bus Service to provide transportation services for the period of July 1st, 2022 through July 30th, 2023. I've read all the supporting documentations, which is on board docs, and I commend the RFP process. I think that they had good documentation for this change in contract, and I hope that it provides a valuable service to our students and our families.
I think it's, I appreciate your wanting to take that amount separately, just to make the public aware. Transportation is a huge part of our budget and the state does not fairly fund us. So we're unfortunately, stuck with this. And so thanks for bringing that up.
Ms. Williams.
Ms. Sonier.
Yes.
Ms. Cousins.
Yes.
Ms. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes,
Ms. Jones.
Yes.
Dr. Roberts.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Mhm. That concludes the consent agenda. We're now into board member reports. Ms. Sonia.
So we have the next meeting for this citywide educational plan on November 16th, 2021. All of the folks at the table have received an invitation. I believe today, board members or tomorrow, board members will also be getting an invitation. I think that, and I'll be at the clinic on Saturday that we're going to be having, and hope to get my booster shot while I'm there.
Can I add to that, Dr. Roberts, on the citywide plan meeting that we're having, we're actually going to have a presentation from Don Rowe, who's with the planning and urban design. It's important that we've continued to talk about this citywide plan, and the district and the board has actually taken on this charge, but we can't be successful in doing this citywide plan without input from everyone. So if you can make that, it will be streamed live. But this is the opportune time to really learn and understand why, why we're doing what we're doing and what the need is in regards to having a citywide plan in regards to education.
our next legislative and advocacy committee meeting is at 6 o'clock on November 17th in this room. It will be live streamed. It will, similar to the last one, which dealt with trauma. This one will deal with one of our other legislative priorities, which is to find solutions to aid our students in transition, in addition to our homeless coordinator, student and transition coordinator, Ms. Thomas Murray, as well as Dr. Brown. We're also in this session going to have a number of community organizations who work in this space to participate in that conversation. And then we are going to have on December 14th, which is a Saturday, I believe at Carnahan High School, Middle School, we're going to have a presentation to the community, and we're going to invite legislators as well as local officials to come and be a part of that presentation. So we'll go over our 3 legislative priorities. We'll distribute our legislative platform, which will be coming before this board either at the work session or the next board meeting for approval. We're finalizing those details based on the work of the committee, and that will be on the 14th.
14th or the 11th, Mr. David? The
Oh,
11th.
I'm sorry, it's the
11th,
11th.
okay.
I apologize. Thank you.
All right,
Everyone's checking their phone.
that's right.
The 11th, sorry.
That's right.
No report at this time.
Yes, hi, I do have a report. This past weekend, I was in Kansas City for the Missouri School Board Association annual conference, and I thought it was a very interesting conference. We had over 500 school boards there. And some of the workshops were very interesting. I'll just talk about a couple of them really quickly. And one of them was the reallocation of resources to renew school facilities. And it basically talked about making sure that your schools are energy efficient and making sure we're updating our equipment and how that we can save money and that kind of thing. And I think we have I think Square Watson is doing a wonderful job with I think it's facilities. Yeah. So that was covered real well. Then they talked about building anti-racist schools, which was a very heated topic, no doubt, because some people wanted to talk about critical race theory. And basically our friends in Kansas City reminded us that they have an African-American themed school, which is a very wonderful school, college prep elementary school. And they seem to be the only ones, but right now I think we have Pomoja here in the city of St. Louis, and I think we're doing a great job as well. So that topic was a hot topic. We also talked about the future of, well, I don't want to talk about this one. This was the future of ESA in school choice. Since I don't have a lot of information on it, and I'm sure a lot of you are aware that that bill was passed, and there'll be a lot of information coming out real soon. So I'd hate to just give you a little information and you not understand what's going on. But they also talked about student speech in the age of social media. And I think it's very important that we be very careful about our young people when they're using Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, what have you, and the legal ramifications of them making speeches or saying things on the internet and the effects that it might have on their school life. So that's just a basic summary of what it was. And addressing the teachers shortage was another workshop that I attended. And basically it all boils down to teacher pay. And what I got from is that our teachers need to be paid more and they need to be considered essential workers because the teachers have been undervalued for far too long. And the basic pay in Missouri since I think it was 2018, we're ranking 49th in the state. And the basic pay was $25,000. And you can find a job with no degree for $25,000. So right now, I think we really need to work hard. And I think Dr. Adams even talked about providing stipends, and many districts are talking about how they can provide stipends and what have you to help our teachers because they're paying back student loans and that kind of thing. So that was what that workshop was about. And I just wanted to say I really appreciate the teachers that we have in this district because you have a hard job and you're not getting paid what you need to. But I know this district is doing all it can to pay you what it has at this time, but we're going to work on it. Thank you.
And I'll conclude my board report. I did travel to Kansas City as well with Donna, and it was an exceptional experience. They are in line with the kind of innovative work that's going on in St. Louis Public Schools. And during my time, I met a lot of champions and supporters for St. Louis Public Schools. And so, Matt, I say to you that you have a team waiting to interface with you and the committee around the legislative ad hoc ask that we have. We also went to 4 schools, and one of the schools was a automotive school They did auto mechanics. They partnered with the Ford Foundation, and we have an opportunity here. We don't have the infrastructure, but we can certainly build partnerships. And there were several board members who reached out to us so that we could bring this message back to Dr. Adams. One is the BUD program, which is building union diversity. And so they are prepared to take young people who are 18 years old and with some competency in algebra and geometry and train them for jobs. Once they finish the apprenticeship, they'll go right into a job. And so Dr. Adams, I'll be sharing that with you on tomorrow as we meet. And in closing, there are some other things that I could report on, but I'll do that with Dr. Adams and then send out a conference summary to the remaining board members. But I want to personally thank Ms. Williams and Ms. Bell for making our trip seamless. Could not have done it without you, especially traveling with a bum foot. And so a special thanks to those two and to the superintendent of Kansas City Public Schools, Mark Bedell, Janet and Jade and Todd from the Missouri School Board Association for making it a wonderful experience. And with that, I'd like to open it up to our patient community. And we'll go on to your comments. Thank you again for your patience. We'll start with Ms. Gwendolyn.
My name is Gwendolyn Coxshell. I'm a community outreach person for University African People's Organization. I'm here to talk about safety on the bus stop. In 2017, while waiting on the school bus, a young lady was abducted. University African People's Organization and the men in the community set out to search for her. Eventually, she was found by a young man named Haru. Her throat had been cut. She had been sexually assaulted, but she was still alive. After this tragic incident, Amari Sanifaru of University African People's Organization and myself decided to form a neighborhood patrol in order to watch the children at the bus stops in the early morning. Within weeks of patrolling, we noticed that there were two other children still isolated on the bus stop. We immediately met with the security personnel for the St. Louis Public Schools at Walbridge Elementary and asked them would they try to consolidate the children at the bus stop in order to deter possible future abductions. They took our suggestions and made some modifications. Moving forward this summer, I was approached by Jahar Kahim, the outreach person for Better Family Life. I was asked would I help them organize a team that would watch the children on the bus stop. When I asked them who was going to sponsor this program, because in the past, when volunteers were used, after 2 weeks, they stopped showing up. They said St. Louis Public School was going to be paying people $13 an hour to watch the children on the bus stop. They would work from 6 a.m. to 8:45 a.m. They would come back in the evenings from 4 p.m. to 6:45, 5 hours a day, 5 days a week for the next 10 months. I respectfully declined the position to head the effort, but I did insist in organizing. We began knocking on doors, talking with neighbors in the community, passing out flyers, informing parents about the bus monitoring. The parents was relieved and excited. They had expressed how because of COVID, the shortages at work, sometimes they were asked to work 12 hours when people didn't show up. They said that sometime when they leave their children on the bus stop in the mornings, that most likely they wouldn't see them till after 6 p.m. at night. We were very cautious when even selecting persons for this task of watching our jewels on the bus stop, but we did it. A team of responsible persons, some retired, some volunteers, community activists, filled out applications, got police reports. Some have even been interviewed by St. Louis Public Schools, and all of a sudden the communication stopped. The closing of public schools have created an increase of students being bused, which puts more students at risk. We'd like to know what happened to this program Is it a problem in HR? We don't understand why the communication does stop. This is supposed to start in August. It's November. And the community have came to me because I'm the one that knocked on the doors. I'm the one that asked them to do this. We had 20 people that were responsible. We had volunteers in August ready to go. Now those people have sort of fell off. So now we got to go back out and find these people because we weren't finna ask just anybody to watch the children on the bus stop. So the community come and ask me, want me to come and ask you, maybe the person in HR needs some assistance. Maybe, you know, because of COVID, you all are short staffed. I don't know. But we just want to know it with this amount of money, it had to be a budget passed by somebody. So we want to know, is it going to happen this year? And if it's not going to happen, could you please let us know? Thank you.
Thank you.
Board members, superintendents, thank you for your attention. My name is Alice Crockett. I'm an SLPS teacher on unpaid administrative leave. And I wanted to speak to the reading teachers and the staffing and the implementation of reading programs in the district that were talked about this evening. Reading, just crucial. But what I want to share with you is someone's story that really impacted me. I recently met a reading teacher at an SLPS elementary school, and she was heartbroken. She and her principal were both extremely upset. She said to me, I promised my students by the end of the year, they would be reading. And now I'm not there. I can't keep my word. She is being terminated. Her religious exemption was not approved. Currently at another elementary school within our district, the reading teacher is covering a third grade class instead of doing her position. Right now, our SLPS website has 5 openings for reading teachers. Board members, a couple of you spoke to the statewide teacher shortage. You have certified teachers with experience. We run maybe from 8 to 25 years worth of experience, and also staff who desire to continue with SLPS. Please, please consider amending this SLPS vaccination policy to include testing. No other district in the St. Louis area and Kansas City Public Schools is terminating. We're the only district that is. Everyone else is allowing testing. Please reconsider this policy. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. I come to you to speak of the situation you have left myself and my coworkers in. With shortage of faculty and staff, those of us left behind are facing unrealistic expectations. No planning periods, no lunch breaks, and even restroom breaks are questionable. While we are asked if we could cover a class during our planning period with compensation, teacher guilt is real, just as bad as Catholic guilt. And administrators know that. My mental health is not worth $30. Getting a lump sum of $750 is not worth my mental health. It is not a reward. It is a bribe to try and keep us in school. I ask you as board members, come into these schools and be substitutes. Every one of you has a bachelor's degree, which is more than what is required in the state of Missouri. Most of you have more than that. Dr. Roberts, respectively, you have been in a classroom and an administrator. Can you please use your past experience to sub in our schools? Mr. Davis, you have a bachelor's in English and a law degree. Can you come sub for our ELA teachers? You could even cover some of the social studies classes with your law background. Ms. Cousins, you have a bachelor's in social work. Can you help our counselors who are being overworked and some are being used as subs instead of providing our students with counseling they need? Ms. Val, you have, with your music theory and computer science degrees, why can't you go into a music classroom and sub? While I don't know if you're a vocalist or an instrumentalist, you can still do general music with the music theory background. I'm an instrumentalist, by the way. Ms. Fowler, I know she's not here, but with her bachelor's degree in accounting and being an adjunct professor at Harrisville State University, can she come in and sub for our math teachers? Ms. Sonia, you have a bachelor's in psychology and working on your nursing degree. Why don't you come in and sub in the science or health class? Ms. Jones, you are a product of the St. Louis Public Schools. Your children are products of the St. Louis Public Schools. You live in the 27th ward. Do you want your children in your ward being taught by substitute teachers that only take a 20-hour online class? Dr. Adams, in addition to your doctorate in educational leadership and administration, you have a bachelor's degree in elementary education and special education, as well as a master's in elementary education. Please come back to your roots and join us in an elementary school. Teachers are suffering. Students are suffering. St. Louis will suffer. Our future will suffer. Please help us.
My name is Arthurine. I'm representing myself. I ain't got no speech because every time I've come up here, I've written a speech and it ain't worth my time. I tried to write one on a napkin, but that wasn't even worth my time. Why? Because you don't listen. Why would you listen to me, a community member, if you're not even listening to your own teachers? They're begging, they're pleading. It was painful to watch last month's meeting where the teachers were begging for support, telling you we are burnt out. We need you to rescind things that you have done. We need you to change your policy around the vaccination. But you guys do nothing but give perfunctory nods and say, thank you for your time. But you're not thanking us for our time. You're wasting our time. These meetings are depressing. Everybody else, they can't say it, but I'm gonna say it. They're depressing. You barely make eye contact with people, even your own teachers. If you don't have teachers, what do you have? What is the point of the school board? Why are you here? Why? Day after day, you make the same decisions. You have board members who admit to saying these policies that we are putting in place make no sense. We're giving away over $1 million to get pennies back. But yet we say, aye, aye, Captain, I'll go along with it. What is going on? What is the point? The students come up here, you don't listen. Parents come up here, you don't listen. Teachers pleading. I've never seen anything like this where teachers are coming up begging for support and y'all just sit here and nod. Perfunctory nods, right? That's what you do because that's what you're paid to do, just nothing. What is the point? What is the point? I don't understand. I don't understand why there's been no change. I don't understand why we give money away for free to corporations who are giving us nothing in return. You said it yourself. I heard you. We see up here that the school district is actually doing pretty well, right? Strong financial position. That's what it said on the slideshow. Why is that not being reflected in our students' reading scores? Math. Why? How is it that month after month, y'all come up here and go through the motions? Do you not have souls? I'm bored myself. Watching it virtually was depressing. People at home are depressed because you keep saying the same thing over and over again, but not delivering. Dr. Adams, yourself in particular, you're helming this ship. What's going on? Where is it going? Is it sinking? Where do you see the school district in 5 to 10 years? Do you care? Well, yeah, you're right. What is the purpose? What is the long-term strategy of this board? Do any of y'all care about our kids? Because it's hard to tell. Do you have kids in the district? I don't understand this. I don't understand how y'all can sit here and claim to care about kids and put kids first and have an emphasis on learning when you don't even listen to the teachers. Begging and pleading month after month for support and for you to listen, and y'all do nothing. Like you're just staring at me now. But I don't care. You know why? Because I don't have the souls of you guys. I know what I stand for. I know who I stand for, and I know what my legacy is about. So while y'all just sit here and represent whatever corporate interest that y'all represent right now, guess what? 5-10 years from now, none of that will matter. People will remember if you failed their kids. We will remember. The city of St. Louis will remember. We're going to remember all of your names. We're going to pay attention. So you can keep getting reelected, however you are getting reelected, paying off whoever you paying off. But guess what? The history books don't lie, and your legacies are being written right now. So I want you to reflect on that.
Good evening. I'm here to just gain an understanding around the COVID-19 vaccine policy and ask you the same respect, ask you to give me the same respect that I give you on your position on this vaccine policy. I would like to know why you, the board, and the district did not approve any religious exemptions. The district accommodates our students regularly, which I advocate as well. But why are you not accommodating your teachers and your staff? This is not equitable. Why did you accommodate some medical exemptions, but not any religious exemptions? Why is SLPS the only district not approving religious exemptions and choosing terminating over accommodating by testing weekly? I'm 100% certain we all want the same health and safety for our students, coworkers, and ourselves. Some of us just need accommodations to get there. Please reevaluate the policy. We need accommodations. Please approve, please accommodate. Finally, I'm confident, despite our differences, we can come to the same conclusion for the health and safety for our students. Please rise to this opportunity to model how we can do so despite our differences. Thank you.
My name is Paul Pertushero. I'm a teacher at Metro High School. I have a speech and I'll probably get to it here in a second, but this whole meeting, there's been an elephant in the room. Actually, there's been a whole herd of elephants in the room. And even if we weren't physically here, it would still be in your meeting. I heard it in Savis. I heard you asking, do we have enough staff? He's like, yeah, we got people stepping up. Or we've got people, how do you say it, pulling through, pushing through, whatever the case is. Basically, I heard it in the budget. I saw that line about reading certification. So you guys are spending money to certify new teachers in this. I mean, even if we weren't here, you could not get away from the fact that you are short-staffed. And a lot of it is your decision, right? You guys decided, I don't even know how, but arbitrarily it seems like, to deny all our religious exemptions, just straight out, none of them, right? Not a single district, the city, the county, the state, President Biden, his own OSHA commitment, it doesn't have that, that draconian policy in there. They either can vaccinate or they can test. We weren't even offered that. We applied for religious exemptions. We were denied. I mean, across the board. Give me a second here, please. I apologize, I was ready, just got sidetracked. So even with those elephants in here, let me get this. I know, I just want to read this one. Okay. 0 exemptions approved. We are again requesting that the SLPS school board amend their vaccination or determination policy to include the allowance of mandatory weekly testing as an alternative. Our priority is and always has been the education and well-being of our students. Students are entitled to an education that will equip and prepare them with a bright future. Students need consistency and stability. Educators and staff who are committed to SLPS and daily bring their passion, experience, and caring to the table. Dr. Adams stated our district was already 240 staff short before the implementation of your policy. This does not include staff who have applied for early retirement. So even with all the numbers that you're pumping out to the news, how many people just walked away when this happened? How many people were denied the religious exemption and moved to Riverview, Jennings? They went to surrounding districts who, just like SLPS, needed people, always need people. What is the total number of staff that has left since the beginning of the school year? How has this max exodus affected our children, our students? How can you say you're providing the best education possible for these children? How can you say that these teachers and staff of 5 to 25 years can be replaced with a substitute of 20 hours of education or 40 hours, 60 hours, whatever it is? It's nothing compared to the years and years of experience and service we have put in for this district. You say the mandate is for the safety of students and staff, yet you are currently paying teachers to give up their playing time, clean their own classrooms on top of everything else they do. Students are entitled to an education that will equip and prepare them for a bright future. Students need this consistency. They need staff who are stable and committed to them. Instead, we have classrooms across the district being taught by building subs. Special education classrooms that should have 2 teachers and now only have 1 remaining. And in some cases, that 1 remaining might be an ICA. So that's not their job. It's not what they're supposed to be doing. It's not what they were trained for. Preschool classrooms that have 2 teachers or should have 2 teachers now only have 1. That 1 might just be an aide. Who knows? Whoever's left, basically, whoever's left standing after your order. Okay. 1 preschool class only has an aide that started the school year and she's been fired. So who's teaching those kids? What do they get? Nothing? Recently, the superintendent said he sent out a bulletin giving teachers strategies to utilize that are, if they are short-staffed. Strategies are not going to fix the problems of teacher and staff shortages, which aren't just here in St. Louis, obviously. Short-term fixes are not going to keep our students safe and enable them to thrive. Why are we the only school district that's terminating employees and not allowing testing? Other school districts in St. Louis, along with the Kansas City Public Schools and charter schools, currently have a vaccine policy in place that allows for testing or vaccination. President Biden, like I said before, Governor Parson, the mayor of St. Louis, Jashara Jones, the St. Louis City Council, Camden County, all of them allow vaccination or testing. You guys are the only ones who aren't. In order to fix the problems, we need policies that are going to benefit our students and give them the best possible education. Thank you for your time.
This is what 27 years will get you. Good evening. I've been reading a lot about the National Geospatial Agency, whose new Western headquarters is being built in North City. I've read that SLU, Harris Stowe, State University, and UMSL have been developing curriculum to ensure local students are qualified to provide workforce for the NGA. What is surprising is that I have seen no mention of St. Louis Public Schools in any of the articles about education institutions preparing their students for the NGA workforce. Why? I've been advised that the SLPS staff person assigned to attend Project Connect meetings does not attend them regularly. Project Connect is working on developing infrastructure for the neighborhoods near the NGA. Infrastructure includes schools. Some of the residents of the new housing that will be developed near the NGA will have children They will need schools. Hopefully, St. Louis Public Schools will be available. The new NGA campus is set to open in 2 years. Hopefully, St. Louis Public Schools will be proactive rather than reactive and reinvest in our schools with NGA relevant curriculum. If not citywide, then definitely in a series of neighborhood or choice schools near the NGA that would attract families to the nearby neighborhoods. When SLPS invests in its schools, parents notice and enroll their children. Please don't allow charter schools to fill this void. Please work with neighborhood groups like Communities One to reinvest in Dunbar Elementary perhaps, and reopen it as a feeder school for Vashon with curriculum preparing our students for NGA careers. Respect the people you already have who value St. Louis Public Schools. Work with the people already here to rebuild our schools for the future. And if I have any more time, I'd like to ask you to move public comments back to the beginning of your meetings where they have been since time immemorial until this year. Not everybody has the stamina that I have to sit through your meetings that I've been doing for 27 years and to wait this long to talk to you guys. From a public relations point of view, it is a bad look. If you're trying to win the hearts and minds of our community to support the St. Louis Public Schools District, not everybody can sit here through an entire meeting to address you. I know that the board felt like they were under siege last year when public comments were filled with people attacking you for closing schools. That only happens during the controversies that are caused by school closing. The rest of the time, you rarely have 10 people coming to speak to you. If you time them like you used to do at 3 minutes, and I don't think you're timing tonight, I wouldn't be talking this long. Please go back to giving us 3 specific minutes, 10 speakers at the beginning of the meeting. If there's an overflow and you want to be courteous, let the overflow speak at the end. But don't make everybody sit here throughout your entire meeting. It's not going to win you many friends. Take care.
That concludes our board meeting. Can I get a motion?
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Ms. Sonier?
Yes.
Ms. Cousins?
Yes.
Ms. Fowler? Ms. Val?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Ms. Jones? Dr. Roberts?
Yes.
We are adjourned.